Good evening. It is Wednesday, February 14th. Happy Valentine's Day to everyone watching at home. I know nobody has anything better to do than watch us on Valentine's Day. Thank you all for coming on Valentine's Day. We have a full board minus Sarah. She's going to try and join us a little bit later if her schedule allows, but we're going to get started in the meantime. We're going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Ben, I'm glad to see you're not on crutches. Congratulations. Okay, adjustments to the agenda? None?
None.
Okay. Good news and recognition. We have some folks that we're going to recognize.
But I'm not sure they're here this evening, so I'm going to just kind of read what we want to recognize them for, and we'll pass the certificates on to Ms. Gulko, and she can give them to the students. I know they're all busy with different activities, but we wanted to congratulate the following students for receiving recognition for their artwork in the Maine Scholastics Art and Writing Competition. Their work was selected from hundreds of entries from 7th through 12th graders from across Maine by a panel of jurors. And these students received a certificate at the Maine Region Scholastic Ceremony last Saturday. And the students who received a Gold or Silver Key Award had their work on display at Maine College of Art from January 29th through February the 9th. And I think Lindsay was going to read the names, so maybe she can go ahead and do that. Sure. And then we'll have Ms. Gulko come up and get the certificates.
Ashley Harris won the Gold Key Award. Congratulations. The Silver Key Award went to Elias Dorsey and Coralie Green. And honorable mention went to Dina Arison, Regan Davis, and Sydney Silva. In the Maine Congressional Art Competition, the honorable mention went to Coralie Green.
Hopefully they're off creating art somewhere.
Yes.
Okay, report from the board student rep.
All right, staying with that congratulatory theme, the winter sports season is now coming to a close, and we've had a lot of success this year. The boys varsity moved on to the quarterfinals after a 66-44 win over Lisbon, and they play the number 1 seed Wells at the Portland Expo on the 17th. The number 3 seed girls basketball is also playing at the Expo against number 6 seed Wells. We've been doing pretty well. Additionally, the girls placed 4th at the WMC Nordic meet, and the boys team placed 2nd overall. And there are state meets coming up for Nordic, Alpine, and indoor track, and all of them will be competing pretty soon, so good luck to all of them. Another thing to note is that there's recently been an RSVP retreat at Freeport. So that's happening, was today and tomorrow, and it's basically a reducing sexism and violence program for a bunch of selected students, so that's pretty exciting. One acts are being performed March 9th and 10th at Yarmouth for the regional competition, and Spirit Week is in full swing right now. In prep for break, and tomorrow is Dress Like a Teacher Day. So if you want to pick your favorite Freeport High School teacher and dress like them, Miss Gulko, you probably won't have any problem with that. There you go. That's about all I have.
Wonderful. Thank you.
And if I could add, the school plays this Saturday. They play against Wells, the basketball team. And they, at the last meeting, I believe they beat them 17 points on their home court. So it should be a
Yes, yeah, that is true.
Boys or girls? Because it sounds like we're both of them are playing Wells.
The boys are playing Saturday.
Both on Saturday?
I don't know.
Don't know when the girls are. Okay.
Tuesday.
Tuesday morning? Tuesday morning at 10 is what I'm hearing for the girls. Well, good luck to everybody. All right. Executive session. So we need a motion, consideration, and approval to enter into executive session regarding a student matter pursuant
Michelle,
to what?
I think we have some of the students coming in.
Oh, perfect.
Come on down.
Who do we have? Do we know?
I don't know.
Okay. Jen, would you be so kind as to?
I would. This is, if I can find her certificate, this is Regan Davis. Congratulations.
Thank you for coming. Thank you. Thank you for pointing that out. Okay, consideration and approval to enter into executive session regarding a student matter pursuant to 1 MRSA Section 405-6B. Naomi? Maddie with the second. All those in favor? Unopposed. Thank you. 6:40.
We'll take care of the agenda while you're out.
You can have it all wrapped up. It will be all wrapped up.
The middle school budget will look great.
Add 20%.
I was gonna go a little higher, John. I was gonna go a little higher.
That's my limit.
Okay.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
We're on TV.
You're on tape, though. That's the whole point, right? Oh, yeah, just on. Yeah. It's just a.
Okay, so do we have a motion stating that having received satisfactory evidence that the behavior causing a student to be removed from school is not likely to recur, we need a motion to move pursuant to 20A MRS section 1001-9 to readmit the student. Maddie and Jen, all those in favor? Opposed? None. Thank you.
Thank you all very much. He will not let you down.
Good luck, Chris. Texting. Okay. All right, so that's 7. That's action from as a result of executive session. Public comment? No one? I don't know. It's Valentine's Day. Apparently people have better things to do tonight. Even the diehards aren't even here. Okay, so we will move on to unfinished business. Workshop budget review. We are going to start with Mr. Pidden from the Durham Community School.
Okay, good evening, everybody. I believe you have a copy of what I'm looking at in front of you. So we have, you'll see one particular request in this upcoming budget cycle. We're coming back for a topic that we discussed this time last year, but that is to add 5 hours to bring 2 of our ed techs up from 30 hours a week both to 32.5 hours, so they can maximize supporting students throughout the school day. One works with literacy support and one works with math support. In addition, we're asking to make those roles from EdTech 2 to EdTech 3. This will allow them to plan and work more independently, and that flexibility we have found is really needed to be able to really sort of maximize the number of students we can support within the school day. So that's our sort of request for new funding. You'll see from our enrollment figures there that our overall enrollment will actually be down about 11 students from where we are currently. That is because we have a larger 8th grade class moving on to the high school. We have 52 students currently in 8th grade, and we're anticipating 40 students in kindergarten, so that's sort of offset of 12. Now there's give or take a few individual students here and there, but those usually equal out. So that is our projected enrollment for next year. You'll see there in the chart. And then just the other piece is just a very brief update from the new programming we had this year. We had, as you know, in conjunction with Freeport Middle School, we had added a polynomial math position that is a half-time with us and a half-time with FMS. That is going very successfully. Students are doing a great job working in that program. It's given us some flexibility and also a real opportunity of equity with FMS, where the students coming together when they get to 9th grade will be in a similar position with similar opportunities, and so that's been terrific. And the other piece that we had added last year was an ed tech to support us with RTIB. The acronym there is around supporting responses to intervention, but specifically in the area of behaviors, and we've been working with that in our K2 area. And again, to this point, that is because it was a new role, we've been developing that role, but it's already being seen as a successful program, and we're working in conjunction with Bonnie Vada, our instructional support director, as we work with she and her staff and some of our regular staff around trying to fill in some of those lagging skills for children at those very early ages with sort of behavioral and also some executive functioning kind of work. Any questions that I can answer?
I just have a question. So the 0.5 math, so you share the, I know you share, do you share one individual now and each school
Yes.
gets half? And so this is asking to have a full person at,
No, I beg your pardon. That was not new request. I'm sorry, I was just giving you a quick brief summary on how last year's investments were working out.
okay.
So that remains the same.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Those are on the left-hand side. Those were the staffing adjustments in our current year.
Okay,
And just a quick sense of how they're working out. And on the right-hand side of that box
Okay.
there, those are the only ones. So it's 5 hours of ed tech time and changing 2 ed techs from a 2 to a 3.
great. Thank you.
When you go from a 2 to a 3, is it typically the same person?
Well, assuming that they are qualified to have that different level of first certificate. So
Oh, it's a certification level?
right, so the certification level, and there's additional amount of college required for that 2 to a 3, and then there's a pay increase. Right now, it's about $1 an hour, I think, increase difference between a 2 and a 3. So you can imagine for someone on a 32.5-hour week, it's $32.5 dollars a week, or $70.
Is that big ideas math? or-
Yeah, it is. In a minute, I'm going to have to cut it out and make it into some paper for you. So that's the impact. Yep, Jen.
And I know this, but just as to add, because I think it's really important, is that an EdTech 3, when you say plan independently, is something that EdTech 2 cannot do. So it does make a
Like
big,
legally cannot do?
Yes, it's the certification, so it does make a big difference in how much they can do.
So currently, yes, right. So currently with the 2, they're under the direct supervision of a teacher. So the teacher does the planning, although I would say we have excellent ed techs, and the association is very supportive of if we're using a program and the teacher said this is the program and we've trained the person in how to do it, they are able to enact that. It's more about being responsive to, right, this child's not quite getting it with this. What I think would work better would be this, and they have that capacity to do that. They're still under the supervision, but that ability and sort of freedom to be able to do that planning is very helpful.
Yep. Valley.
So, do you expect that you'll be able to retain the same staff when you move the ed techs from 2 to 3? Are the same people going to be able to get the additional qualifications?
Actually, people in those current roles are actually certified teachers.
Okay.
But who choose to work at this level for other factors.
So even though they're qualified, they still cannot work independently unless you actually change the role from 2 to 3.
Right.
Even though it's the same person, same qualifications.
Right, because what we have to do is, if there was, money, we could just change those roles right now, per se. But the role has to be, obviously like any other position, we have people in that capacity, and so although they have the skill set, at the moment as a district, we don't have those positions as a 3. Mm-hmm. So we're asking to make those into a 3 so we can sort of maximize that benefit.
Are these roles the same? Is this the same ed tech time from 30 to 32 and a half, and then
Yes.
the same people that are 2s going to, okay.
Exactly. It's the literacy support ed tech and the math support ed tech, and so it's 2 positions that we're adding a little bit of time and
elevating to a 3.
Yeah.
Okay.
I do have another question. It's about the intervention teacher, 5 to 8. That is not in the budget, but I'm curious to know what that position is and what an intervention teacher does.
So, bless you. So currently in our math, we'll start with math intervention. The way that works is we have that working K through 6, and the math, and then the ed tech works with that teacher. So we're providing math intervention and support for students who are struggling, K through 6. And then we have a different model in 7th and 8th grade where there's a sort of a flex period in the day that the math teachers work with struggling math students. So we kind of have the math covered. With literacy, because the demands in literacy in the younger children, there's a whole different level of demand. We currently only are able to support literacy intervention for students K through 4. And then the teachers provide that other support 5 through 8. And so what that particular position was around adding literacy support for students in grades 5 through 8. And some of that is for students who have not attended our school or in our district prior to coming in, and they may move in 5 through 8 and be a struggling learner, but they've kind of moved in after our opportunity to support them, if you like. And so again, the teachers provide support, but it's not able to be quite as responsive as we are with the math.
And this would be pull-out support? So it would be an EdTech outside of the classroom, or is push-in support?
It was not an EdTech, it was a teacher request.
It would be a teacher, okay.
Because of the level of expertise needed. And it would be a combination primarily because of student availability. So, it's always that question of robbing Peter to pay Paul. So we envision it, each grade level has what we refer to as flex time, which is sort of, or remember we had the flex lift conversation, but it's a sort of 30-minute block around providing different instruction or opportunities around needs. And so there would be opportunity within flex time to provide that, but then we also envision that there would be time during those students' literacy time where they may be getting some direct instruction. We had looked at that initially as a full-time position, but then we'd also looked at it as we were balancing things out, that a half-time position would also be a viable piece in that. And so that may be something we're gonna work through different options this year, but that may be something kind of like we did with the EdTech time. We may come back to you again next year and say, hey, this is where our plans are now, to reconsider at that point. Yep.
Will, you had mentioned about the polynomials class,
Yeah.
and is that a program that's going to continue, or is that a pilot?
Oh no, sorry, you're just on the outer distance there. Sorry. The trouble is, if I put my glasses on to look at you, and good chance I'm going to hit my face right on this microphone. So the polynomials class is being taught by Mr. Briasco Bryn, and he has been a long-time teacher at Freeport Middle School, if you're not familiar. And then as we were doing a lot of work with the middle school and high school sort of math committee around implementation of big ideas, we were also looking at, as it's been a board level conversation, what are we doing for those students who are really sort of flying with math and ready to extend? And so Mr. Bryn has that ability to work with students at that level, and so in conjunction with Ray Grogan at the middle school, Mr. Bryn he does 7th and 8th grade section at FMS and a 7th and 8th grade section at DCS. So we anticipate that to be an ongoing program. It's making a very good, strong start.
As the newbie, it seems like, so last year, when we look at the back of this, last year you got some additional support in to meet your special ed needs, and this year you're asking for that again. Do you feel like with that support, will you feel comparable to other schools in the area, or will that meet your needs?
So it wasn't special ed per se, but
that was EdTech last year.
And this year,
Okay.
those roles, it's a little confusing, Maddie, because we have an EdTech is a role that predominantly does work in special education.
Right.
These EdTech roles are actually in regular education side of the budget. Not that it really matters, it's just they come out of a different article. But you're correct that they are providing student support for struggling students.
I'm interested in support, regardless
Absolutely.
of how they're classified.
So, so I think if your question was, are we comparable to other schools around the area?
And do you feel like your needs are being met, or is this something that we're going to continue to fix a tiny bit at a time every year?
Yes and maybe is the answer to that. So do I think that our needs will be met for next year? Yes. Maybe we would be back in the future. one of the pieces that we're all learning about with this work around RTI, and in fact, intervention. We've been talking recently about making sure we don't overuse this term RTI because it's getting so broad that it's becoming a bit of a catch-all and therefore ill-defined. But one of the pieces of proficiency-based is it's really made us zoom in on a small percentage of students who may not qualify for the supports of special education, but may need ongoing, year-by-year support in order to be proficient as they move through high school and earn a proficiency-based diploma. So on one hand, it makes you really say, yikes, these children have always been here. How have we done this in the past? And in a way, that's why proficiency-based is so important, because it doesn't necessarily allow them to move through with seat time and credit hours. On the flip side of that, it's now making us say, all right, we have to really make sure that now, as children move up through, from kindergarten through 12th grade, we can't make it up when they just get to the high school. And so we are identifying a subset of students where we're saying, all right, they're kind of in between being able to be successful with what we always offer in the classroom and the differentiation and all of that, but they're not quite meeting that, but they're not quite qualifying for different reasons for the supports of special education. So that's why you're seeing these sort of roles around RTI or intervention kind of emerging. We're learning about it. And that's why we're trying things as we go. I'm not sure we're quite there yet, but our hope year on year is that we're getting better both in the classroom level, our own understanding of how to support students. So it can't just be all extra people. But when there might be the need for extra people, extra programming, that we're using them effectively. So I'd love to say this is it, but it's an ongoing process as we really get stronger and stronger with proficiency based.
But you feel we're moving in the right direction?
Oh yes, and I think at the right pace. I mean, we can't throw. If we throw too much at it, we won't be able to develop it properly either. So it's that balance.
Thanks, Will.
He's afraid to say he's never going to come back for more because we're going to hold him to it. You said, Will, on Valentine's Day that you were
that
good.
was not my intention.
Valentine's Day massacre.
Did you say Valentine's Day massacre?
Yeah.
Any other questions for Will? Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next up, Mr. Grogan, Freeport Middle School.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I think that a lot of what Will said kind of is very similar to mine. The ed tech requests of the increased hours, the 2 to 3 type stuff, is the same thing for the same reasons that we would like to see that, and we're glad to see that's in the budget. The other two that are things that are currently this year that we had to add due to increased enrollment that we didn't budget for are the one more leadership stipend because of the size of the 6th grade class having 2 teams. We needed a team leader on each one, so that's really kind of a 3-year request, this being year 1, next year's budget being year 2, the year after being year 3 of that. And then the other is when we had 120 kids come out for the middle school play, and we typically take about 45, I did have to call up Becky and say, we have a little bit of a problem here, and we did add a second stipend in there to try to get some more kids involved in that. So we do anticipate that problem moving forward, so we would like to continue having 2 middle school plays. It was a problem when we had 120 kids walk in and sign up for that. And we made it into an opportunity, but yes. And I was just glad that Jill Hooper was very willing to do 2 plays, because that's not an easy undertaking. Exactly. So those are really the requests that we have that are in the budget here. Well, thank you very much.
Kate. Oh, no. Kate.
I just was wondering if you could explain a little bit more the leadership stipend, because wasn't sure I caught the full explanation there.
So every building has, a different number of people on their leadership team that's a stipended position. And what we have them for is each kind of department team and each grade level team. With the current 6th grade team, there's 2 different teams because there's a 4-teacher team and a 3-teacher team. They have a different prep period. They run different things altogether. So we needed a separate teacher to run each team. The original 6th grade team leader couldn't be the team leader on the other team.
So, Ray, same as with Will, question about the EdTech, behavioral EdTech. I think this is the 3rd year in a row I see it as part of the conversation revolving the budget. Can you tell us a little more about why that would be needed and what you've done in the past to address this issue, because that hasn't been approved in the last 2 years?
I think really what the goals of that ed tech would be really to focus primarily on the 6th grade, on a lot of executive functioning, organization, a lot of just, really those student skills of a kid to help them navigate middle school and high school thereon. We'd like to hit them early on and really work with that. Right now, the teachers are doing the best they can. Ms. Latham's doing as best they can to kind of teach those executive functioning skills and really work with those kids individually on that or in small groups on that. But it would be a lot better if we had an ed tech embedded into the 6th grade who is teaching those skills on the fly in the classroom, really reinforcing those behaviors, besides also doing the small group and individual instruction around that. So that ed tech would really work closely with our social worker and Ms. Latham on kind of the practices and the language and the technique around the executive functioning instruction, but then applying it with kids in the 6th grade primarily.
And would this be a full-time ed tech?
1, 2, 3, yeah. Yes, but it would be full-time. We can definitely, yep.
Do you have the JMG? Does it run similarly at the 2 middle schools?
Yes. So we have it as a. We have all the 6th graders rotate through one rotation of it. We rotate through, 6 different unified arts as 6th graders, and then as 7th and 8th graders, just certain kids take it, and most of it don't take a foreign language who do that. So I think it's a little different thing. Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, so they rotate through flex, not through the specials. I'm just repeating because people at home can't hear you.
Yeah, all of ours rotate through the special, so all 6th graders will get it.
So it's art, music, JMG. You rotate through that way. Okay. And having a 6th grader right now, it seems like a lot of that JMG time for the 6th graders is around exactly what you're talking about, that organizational executive functioning stuff. Is this in addition to that?
Definitely in addition to that. I mean, at our school, that's, for 1 trimester every other day. And we have, for some kids, that's great and it's really good, but there are a good number of kids that need more than that need that direct instruction on an individual or, small group basis.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So what is currently being done to...
I don't know whose phone that is.
It's an empty seat in the audience.
Yeah, exactly.
So, Ray, currently, how do you address the needs of those kids, other than Ms. Latham trying to fit it into everything else?
It's the teachers before class, after class, during class, BCS, after school. It's really kind of all hands on deck, doing the best we can, And I think that, that's why that request has kind of been in there. That's something that's, come from the teachers, on that 6th grade team, thinking that would be something that would help, with the reinforcement of those skills.
Maddie.
Sorry again, I feel like a newbie with these questions, but so Valley just asked a question about what you're not requesting this year, I believe, which is the, where is it?
C, I
behavior,
think.
the ed tech for behavior, but, so that would be in addition to the 1.5 that is in the budget this year. Is that,
I think you lost me on that. Sorry.
you are requesting, it is in the budget to get the 1.5 ed tech. No, you're just moving.
I think it's
2
just
to
a
3.
moving 2 to 3.
Yeah,
Yeah.
what is in the budget is moving the 2 to 3 or increasing some of the hours within that. What's not in the budget was the getting another full-time RTI ed tech to focus on the executive functioning skills.
Got it.
So
Thank
it's a full ed tech position, not $32 a week.
So similar high-level question as to Will, are your support services needs being met?
So I kind of look at it two different ways. I think, a number of years ago, myself and several other people were here talking about the special ed level, saying we, need more special ed level services at our building and didn't feel comfortable with what we have. I would say right now the special ed level of teachers and ed techs is really good. Like, I feel really good about the special ed teachers and program we're offering with that, and that's kind of, we've added teachers, we've added ed techs over the last couple of years, and it's really benefiting, and it's great. And then, the part that I think that, why that budget request was in there was the kids that aren't special ed but need that support.
Sort of like
As I told Valley, we're hitting that through all these other different ways. There is a different way to hit it.
Got it. Thank you.
All right. Going once, going twice. Thanks. Ms.
Hi,
Golka.
everyone. Okay. So, in looking at our budget this year, really we have a few different kind of major things that are on here. One is, as you're aware, we have our NEASC accreditation visit coming up. It is a significant amount of money. That is the recommended amount from NEASC, and that covers anything and everything that falls under the NEASC visit, which includes hotel rooms, to the materials they need, to we cover all of their meals. We have 2 outstanding NEASC chairs, 2 of our FHS teachers who have an incredibly detailed budget of how that money will be spent. And so in order for us to do the accreditation, that piece of the funding is required for us to do the visit. In terms of when we're thinking about district goals and our building goal, we are requesting funds for a 0.5 math strategist to do some targeted coaching. If you remember that for the past 2 years, we have had a PLC coach, Lisa Hogan, who has worked with all of our teachers. She meets with every teacher in the building, is on a PLC team, and they meet either 2 times or 3 times a week. And their focus is instructional strategies and improving instruction and expanding repertoire of what teachers are using. And we feel like having a coach that can target math is where we have the potential to make some real gains. We are incredibly lucky to have the Big Ideas program, though I think that we need some help in exploring those resources and how to maximize everything that Big Ideas offers. And targeted coaching for our math teachers can really help them take their instruction to the next level. You've seen that our math scores absolutely need improvement, and we feel like this could make some major gains in that coaching. In addition to that, we are asking for separate stipends for our department chairs. In the past, our department chairs have been lumped in with our leadership team members' stipend. And what has happened is different administrators have have had different configurations of leadership teams in this building. What we have shifted to is an academic leadership team, a team of department chairs, and an operations team. The operations team deals with the day in and day out operations of the school, anything from emergency drills to helping to talk about our student summits that we hold. Whereas the leadership team is talking about big picture instruction. They have been working really hard on our strategic plan for the last 5 years. They are part of the League of Innovative Schools and go to the conferences. They are some of the people who are conducting school visits. Department chairs then take that work to the department level, and they are really focused in on what instruction and the strategic plan means for that department, as well as the department duties of budgeting and ordering materials and who is teaching which course and consulting with me on that. And so the roles are different, though the stipend has been combined. Where we stand right now is that teachers are negotiating which portion of that stipend they will have for the leadership team member and the department chair. Some people fill both roles, some do not. And so we feel like having a separate stipend for the department chair can really clarify their roles and responsibilities, as well as the leadership team's roles and responsibilities, and do it in an equitable way. In terms of last year, our increased position for ELA has been a huge support for us. We have been able to create 3 targeted support classes, one in math, one in math, 2 in ELA, and we've used NWEA scores to identify kids who are significantly below grade level, and they're taking those intervention classes in addition to their English and math course. And this increase in 0.5 position in the ELA department allowed us to shift some things around and enable us to offer those classes this year. We're collecting data on those students. They are taking the NWEA test periodically throughout the year to monitor their progress and see the success of that program. But that has definitely been a huge help for us. Our SAT team, Charlie is leading the SAT team. The stipends for that have been also a big support. That's a really dedicated group of teachers and faculty members who meet to target some of our most at-risk students. So that can be academically, behaviorally, attendance, and usually all of those things combined. And they make targeted plans for those teachers, and the stipends have enabled us to put a great deal of time towards those efforts. And then the additional 3 days for guidance counselors was also a big help. That happened in the summer. A big portion of summer time for guidance is taken up by new registrations. Anyone who's transferring into the district, they meet with them individually, do what we do with kids during the year. And so these 3 days allowed them to also focus on other projects that they were doing for the student body, planning Naviance lessons, and planning workshops that they were hosting for students, as well as meeting with individual students and parents over the summer to set up courses and get them acclimated to the high school. So all 3 of those things have definitely been a support this year.
The stipends for department chairs, is there a budget adjustment that comes along with it? I don't see that in this sheet. So what's...
No, because it would be an adjustment to, it would be reducing the leadership team stipend in order to create that department stipend.
So you're saying it's budget neutral?
I think it's budget neutral, or it's very close to budget neutral. Because there's not an equal number of leadership team members, there's actually fewer department chair members, and so it would be a really minor impact on the budget, or budget neutral.
How often do we do the NEASC accreditation?
Going forward, or in the past?
Both?
In the past, we've done it once every 10 years.
Okay. Going forward?
That would be something that we would discuss with the board about, is this after the process of is this something that we want to commit to in another 10 years from now?
I guess I don't understand.
So do we have a choice?
I thought just to be accredited, you have to do it every so many years.
You do. But
Is it 10 years?
It is 10 years, but there's nothing in state statute or anything that requires you to be accredited.
So we've seen a pattern of some high schools are deciding to pull away from the accreditation process due to the expense, due to the time. There's certainly value in the process, and then there's also a large time commitment that this has taken. Every single faculty member has to be a part of the NEASC committees and be a part of this.
Through the 10 years, or just leading up to the actual
Leading up to it. So really the heavy work takes a little bit over a school year. So we started this halfway through the school year last year.
So
And
what
then
is... sorry.
I was just going to say, and sometimes after you are even reaccredited, there may be follow-up reports and different things like that. And I think it is worth a board workshop at some point around it. And reflection is always good, but there may be better pathways to that.
Interesting. I just hear when schools are unaccredited, I think that's bad.
Are they the only organization that accredits high schools?
I don't know that much about it. I mean, no, because it's only New England. And so I don't know the other processes, but I do know that other schools have used different processes for reflection. For accreditation, I don't know that much about what other organization would do an actual accreditation for you. But I think that's something that we could look into. Who's pulling away? Why are they pulling away? And what are they doing for a reflection process moving forward?
Right. Does it impact kids that if you graduate from an unaccredited school, does that look badly on them, or does it not matter? Other questions for Jen? Yeah.
Same question. Are your special ed needs being met?
Are our special ed needs being met? I feel like we are really lucky in this school of the special ed supports that we have in terms of the student to teacher ratio for our support classes, in terms of our number of ed techs. Last year we had some challenges with teachers being out for different reasons, which doesn't have anything to do with what were provided for positions. I think that we're always looking to improve how we're helping support our special ed students, but I think we are, in my opinion, we are well staffed.
And Jen, you mentioned that the stipends for the SAT team members allowed everyone to put in extra time and extra work. So you have seen a tangible benefit to having those stipends, correct?
Definitely. I think because what's required here, particularly with high school students, is that we have to think outside of the box for a student who is struggling with attendance and struggling with academics and behavior, and the follow-up with their teachers, because they have potentially 6 or 7 teachers, that the team has been able to use the time to do that follow-up that they need to make concrete plans for these students of getting them back on track.
Student assistance team, right? That's what SAT stands
Yes.
for? Okay.
Yes. Some people think we need a new name because we have 2 SATs that are important.
Help kids take the test. That's fantastic. Big Ideas, it sounds like, is growing sort of to the next grade level. Is there money in the budget for the curriculum materials for that, or is that just okay? So it's not in your budget, it's in Cynthia's budget. Okay.
Yeah. And our geometry and algebra 2 teachers are already piloting. So they have some of the materials. We have class sets. But really one of the benefits of Big Ideas is that so much of it is online. Yeah. And so our teachers right now are implementing those programs. They're not following it lockstep right now in those classes. They have been asked to pilot at least 2 units throughout the year, and many of them are doing more than that.
Anything else for Jen? Okay, thank you. Okay, 9B, consideration and approval for policy CBI evaluation of the superintendent of schools, second read. So this is our second and potentially final read of this policy on the superintendent's eval.
Yes, it is. And in your board package, you'll see that the suggestions you gave last time, they're highlighted in yellow. And so I think this is ready to go. And with your approval, I think we'll be able to use this tool this year.
Do we have a motion? Naomi, a second? Valley? Any discussion? Further questions? Okay, we'll take a vote. All those in favor? Any opposed? No, thank you. That always helps our agenda when we've got 10 minutes scheduled and it took 10 seconds. Okay, so that was 9B. 10, new business. 2018-2019 Freeport High School Program of Studies. Oh, back again, here comes Jen.
I'll just stay up here tonight. So as you know, we had an extra week. That's why you have a new version, because if you give us another week to do some more revising and editing, that's what we do. So this is the version that you want to look at. The other one can be recycled, sadly. I know it's a lot of paper. And really we had just more chances to go over this again and again. Some of the changes from the first version that was sent to you to tonight's version is just page numbers. Once we did some formatting, things changed. So there were only a couple of changes that we made in addition to that list of initial changes that you had. If you remember last year, for those of you who are members of the board, we made some pretty significant changes to formatting last year, so we didn't need to do a lot of the formatting this year. I would say that I won't go through every change that we've made. I'll try to highlight the major ones. You'll see in the beginning the addition on page 2 and page 7 of our core values and belief and our new school profile that we're pretty excited about, a much more visually stimulating school profile. So those are our 2 additions in there. Each year we take out the requirements as we're going along that they have changed for either the class of 2017, class of 2018. So those have been removed, as you see on page 10. Page 12, a change in the language is making sure that we are saying course and or learning experience. That matches the district language that you've seen, the policies that have been changed of looking at a learning experience and not necessarily the same type of course. And then if I go down to page 24, one of the things that we decided to do was to not put all of the proficiency-based policies in here. It would have made this almost 100 pages. And so decided that was something that we would say that would help with formatting too. So small detail, if you see, like if this is, because we don't print these anymore for students, we print very few copies. Students look at this online, and just a small change that's really helpful is there's a hyperlink now to the table of contents, so you can jump from section to section, which I think is a bigger deal than probably people think of. It's such a large document, for kids to scroll through it can be challenging. And so I would say that when you're looking at the changes for page 28 through 33, a significant change that we made was to decide to separate American Studies. American Studies has been run as a humanities class with English and Social Studies together, and we have decided to split those classes into 2, and there were multiple reasons why we decided to do that, and that decision was made with the teachers who teach American Studies, as well as the department chairs for English and Social Studies. It was a challenge for them to find the time for purposeful co-planning for all 4 teachers. It's different than a co-teaching pair. They were all 4 trying to pair together and develop assessments together. A lot of the work that they do will still continue. Some of their major assessments can still be done in an interdisciplinary style. It's a major implication on the schedule that students had to have that class at the same time, both days, white days and maroon days. And basically American Studies drove the entire schedule for the rest of the school. And so we were also feeling like sometimes the scheduling of that was imbalanced. You'd have 2 teachers and you might have a section that had 35 kids in it, which divided by 2 teachers is okay, but it might turn out that another section had fewer than 20 with 2 teachers in it, and the inequity was based on that class was offered at another time as another class. And so dividing this into ELA 11, which is American Lit, and then 11th grade would be American History. So they would still be studying the same content. They would still be focused on the same standards. They would still be collaborating on assessments that they can do interdisciplinary style, but the classes will be meeting at different times. Moving on to PE. We're pretty happy about some of the changes with PE. One class that we're going to offer is Unified PE, which is similar to our Unified basketball team. Right now we have Adaptive PE, which is just for our special education students. Unified PE will be a class for general education students with students with disabilities in the same class together, which we're pretty excited about that. We've also added a class that this is a change from your first version. We went back and forth. We have now called this class Tone and Sculpt. We are purposely trying to make this a class that attracts people who are gym phobic, not wanting to maybe lift weights with some of the athletic teams, and teaching them healthy fitness habits without being intimidating. And so the PE teachers came up with that name, hoping that will persuade the right people to enroll in that class. Any of you can do that too. And you'll see one of the other things that we added was after school fitness lab. We have a sign-in process in the fitness center. We're so lucky to have that fantastic fitness center that students have to do 45 hours outside of school time. And that will be a huge advantage for kids who can't fit PE in their schedule, still want to work out, still want to be healthy and get the credit for it. And moving on to math, we took out geometry in the real world. That has not run in the past 3 years due to low enrollment. It's actually no enrollment. And instead, we have decided to put in place a college level statistics class. As we've briefly touched on before, our guidance counselors are working really hard to research how we can implement concurrent enrollment classes where students would be enrolled in a Southern Maine Community College or through UMaine Augusta. And there's a couple of other programs where they would get college credit for a course taught here, either online or actually there's a process that our teachers can do. And so statistics is one of the ones that we're hoping to start with, that students will be here taught by one of our teachers, but the teacher will be endorsed by the university or the college, and then the students will leave with college credit, which will be fantastic.
What does CP mean in parentheses?
College prep.
College prep,
Mm-hmm.
okay.
And then another major change that we've talked about for about the past year, Charlie and I have talked with Will and Ray about this, as well as our science teachers, and have spent a ton of time working on this, is that we have decided to make a required 9th grade science course, Earth Systems. So right now, students are able to enroll in Science and Sustainability, Honor Science and Sustainability, or Honors Biology. The issue with that is as we fully adopt the next gen science standards here. There is no other class later on in their 10th, 11th, or 12th grade year where they hit the earth and space standards. It's only in 9th grade. So students who, if they did not have a required 9th grade class, they would be missing an entire section of standards. And the belief behind the Next Gen standards is all students, all standards. So right now, there is almost too much choice in what students were choosing in terms of our science courses, that they could completely take a pathway this way and completely miss a whole set of standards. And feeling like we want to produce well-rounded science students who are ready for college level science, we feel like it's really important for them to experience all of the standards. Other schools in Southern Maine have already made this shift, and we started speaking to schools last year of talking about their move to a required science class. Many schools have always had this in place. Really, there was very little choice in science until you got to 11th or 12th grade, where you could take an additional science course, and the pathway was pretty set for 9th and 10th graders. We still will offer an honors and a college prep level of that class. So there will be 2 different levels. And then right now we have a focus science class, which is for our students who tend to struggle with both science and literacy. And it's same standards, a little bit slower pace for those students, and we'll offer that as well. And then I spoke about the American Studies change to American History. We've also added this year, it wasn't in the program of studies last year, but we decided to add AP US History. We offered AP World in the past, and this year we've decided to offer AP US and move forward with that next year. We are going to strongly encourage that kids take American history first, but it's not a requirement. Some students are finding AP US incredibly challenging because their freshman year was global studies, their second year was Western studies, so they have not had American history since potentially middle school. And so they're going straight into an AP class and finding that challenging. Some people are totally fine with that challenge. So we've decided to leave that up to parent and student and teacher to decide together who's ready for that class right away and who needs to take American history first. And then we've had some pretty major changes to our performing arts classes. I am personally a little bit disappointed that we're not going to offer Intro to Dance anymore. We just have not been able to sustain enrollment. Kids, for a variety of reasons, are not interested in that class. And so we've got some very popular drama classes and have decided to expand that. I think one that will be great for the district is a class that Natalie Safley has created called Creative Drama, which the purpose of it is to create a whole play from start to finish and bring it to an elementary school in the district. And so I think we're hoping that we'll get strong enrollment for that class. And then there were some changes to things, names of courses at Region 10. That's Region 10's feedback, changing commercial art to graphic design and food trades to culinary art. In the very, very back, this section we added last year, that's just an at a glance. And so we've made edits to that based on any edits that were made in the previous pages. So we've really had so many people go over this with a fine-tooth comb that I'm sure you'll find an error in the first 5 minutes. But we really have gone through this page by page to try and make this reflect what we're offering and what students are interested in. Questions?
Thank you so much. Sounds like you guys have done an incredible amount of work to update this program of studies, and it looks wonderful. So I have a question about the new Earth System Science.
Mm-hmm.
Would that be required for 9th graders, meaning science and sustainability would be pushed to the 10th grade?
No, science and sustainability is being replaced.
Replaced
with
it.
With
Okay.
Earth Systems. Yep.
Okay.
And so there are, if you see I should know this page by heart, but I don't. I know pretty close where it is. Page 28 and 29. These are sample course sequencing. They're not the only course sequencing. And you'll see that the pathway for science for 9th and 10th grade is very clear. For Earth Systems as a 9th grader, biology as a 10th grader, and then 11th and 12th has so many different pathways that that you can choose, and many students take more than one. But we do feel like Earth, the 9th and 10th grade science will be pretty set, which is common to many of our neighboring schools. Yeah.
I just had. So does this mean that for the 9th grade students that honors biology would not be an option?
Right.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. It would be an option for them for 10th grade.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Could they take both honors bio and the Earth and
they could.
The new group?
We tried that with some students this year. It's really hard to fit in their schedule time-wise, but if it fits, they could. They could take them concurrently. Mm. And I think that even when we say that, that is, 95% of the students will have that as a prerequisite. We always have exceptions to, it could be that a student has come from another school where the order is flipped, and which is very common because each school decides how they're going to have their progression of classes. So we always have to make exceptions, but I think there would be very few freshmen who could fit both of those science classes in at the same time. As they get older, their schedule opens up more. Mm-hmm.
Just to follow up on the Earth Systems course that you were talking about, you mentioned that it has the things necessary for the proficiency-based. Mm-hmm. So did you find that in science and sustainability, did you have to, are there some components to that went into Earth Science, or were most of what was in science and sustainability kind of, not unnecessary, I hate to use that word, but you know what I mean? Did you find that it just wasn't in the that needed for proficiency based?
Well, it's different than proficiency based. It's about the science is done by actual content standards. And so, for example, one of the things that they spend a lot of time doing in 9th grade science right now is working towards the periodic table. Mm-hmm. That will really shift more to an introduction of that. They do that in middle school, and then the focus of that will be in chemistry, introduced along the way. We estimate that about half of the topics in science and sustainability will stay. They already do some earth science, but what we've looked at is all of the NGSS standards and how they'll pan out over 4 years. And we feel like this course sequencing that's on page 29 will allow every student to hit all of the standards for NGSS. And so there might be some things that were tackled in the 9th grade science and sustainability course that will move into biology or move into chemistry because it was more, it was a broader class, and now it's going to be more focused on these earth systems and those particular standards.
Is that why then I see on page 29 it says class of 2021 and beyond will be required to take chemistry and physics, so the science path will look pretty, it's pretty tight if you're doing earth systems biology, then chemistry, physics.
And one of the things that we've talked about, though, is that some schools are offering a chem/physics class. And so that's a potential for when our current freshmen are juniors that we don't offer that class right now. But our students who are our strongest students most of them already take chemistry and physics and double up in other places.
Great, thank you.
I was just wondering what the changes were again to the Region 10 course.
Just names. So on page 63, they changed commercial art to graphic design. And on page 64, they changed food trades to culinary arts.
Are you sure it wasn't the other way around? Because it says commercial art in the book I'm looking at. So that's what I just wanted to double check.
Oh, thank you. That's probably the first error that you found. Which page? Which page?
Page 64. It says commercial art. And are you saying it should say graphic?
It should say graphic design and illustration.
And
yes.
It was the same for culinary arts.
It does say.
I only have one.
Yeah, you have the wrong. That is not the right one.
This one. this artwork.
How did I end up opening both at the same time?
Okay, good. We didn't have that mistake. We'll find another one. We
So-
love the artwork on the other front too, but it didn't print as well. It didn't copy as well. That's later in the book now, though. It's back here. Sorry,
So after the class of 2021, there will be a requirement for chemistry and physics. So that would mean that the course progression would be Earth systems, which would be required, and then biology, because that's the only class being able to be taken, then chemistry and physics. So I'm kind of confused about how there are really going to be any options after the class of 2021 if you're going to be required to take all 3 courses, and in the 10th grade only 1 course is offered.
So some students in their 11th grade will take a class that's called Chem/Physics.
Okay, so that will be in addition.
That would be in the 11th grade, and then in the 12th grade they would have an elective that's open to them. So when we're looking right now at the we've looked at numbers for the past 3 years of how many students are enrolled in both chemistry and physics. It's a significant number, but it's usually students who are interested in the sciences who are enrolled in a full year course of each. And then some will go straight to AP Physics. They won't take that general physics class.
Right.
That's another option that we already have right now.
So, kind of a secondary question: will there be a course offered that would be an AP chemistry physics class as well?
So we don't have AP Chem right now. And so if AP Chem is offered on AP for All, so that's the online version would be the option. So we have not talked about adding AP Chem.
So it wouldn't be a combined class that you would be able to have AP Physics as well, because I think
Right, no.
especially a lot of kids like in my grade right now, most of us are leaning toward the AP Physics route, and I don't see a lot of kids taking regular physics before AP Physics, so I think a lot of those high achieving kids aren't going to want to take a chemistry physics class before being able to go to the AP Physics class.
So let me clarify a little bit. So if you were a student who was hoping to take AP Physics your senior year, then you would most likely take Earth Systems, then Biology, then Chemistry, probably honors chemistry, and then AP Physics. If you are a student who your real passion is the humanities and science is not your strongest, you would take the Chem/Physics course, which is going to be a survey course. They're not going to go as deep into concepts of chemistry and physics as a full year course would. So if you're a student who really is passionate about science and thinking about sciences for college, you would not take that Chem/Physics course.
So you'd have to separate it in 2 years.
Yes, or take them at the same time, which some students do.
Okay.
So science is one of those areas where some kids take a lot of sciences by the time they leave here. And so, because they've also got the STEM options on top of these. So some students are taking honors chemistry and then enroll in AP Physics and then also take forensics or take intro to engineering and design. And so it's probably the content area that has the most variety of the way that the paths go.
Just talking about the STEM section, when did the lab fees get added in for that? It seems it's almost like punitive that I don't see fees for other classes, but then these kind of stood out there.
There are some classes, and we put that in there as a requirement. We also always offer scholarships for students who need them. Photography has a fee, and that fee has been standing before I arrived here, and I think we've always made sure that all students can participate in the class.
Other questions? Oh, Valley.
A question about this social studies department. I have heard some comments from parents that they would really enjoy having honors classes in that department. Could you remind me what's the reason why we have honors classes in every department except social studies?
Well, so our version of that, it's different depending on the grade level. So there's an honors option in the 9th grade and the 10th grade. And in 11th grade, the version of honors would be to choose an AP class. That's the same with the ELA department. So if students in the 11th grade want to take the highest level course that we offer, they would enroll in the AP course. And so we have discussed keeping the honors option open. And I think it's been a long-standing part of that department. But I think the heterogeneity of that class is something that, we've worked hard to maintain while still giving students the option to pursue an honors project.
I mean, the way I understand it is that the honors option isn't nearly as rigorous as an honors class. So that what happens is that you have kids getting honors for social studies 9th and 10th grade, which is an equivalent to honors in the other departments, because the honors courses are much more rigorous than the honors option.
I think it depends on what the student does as a project. I think some students have chosen really rigorous projects for the honors option. And, that's our hope, is that it's extending their learning beyond what they are doing. But certainly it's something that we are constantly discussing, but we have, like I said, we feel like there are options for 11th and 12th graders to take those advanced classes.
Lindsay.
Sorry if you just said this, but I didn't quite hear it. So is the reason that you don't feel like you have enough interest in a full honors level class for, say, global studies or Western studies? What's the reason why it's different compared to the other departments in terms of honors offerings? Did you just explain that? I'm really sorry if I was spacing.
A little bit, yeah, about that. I think that we feel like the heterogeneity of that class is, something that's important for students, and that can be a huge benefit to their learning too. And they have this pathway to honors through the honors option. And so different departments have decided that in kind of different fashion of how they've moved forward. It's the same with our world language classes don't have honors options. They have that we would potentially, they actually don't have the honors option. There's some students maybe that would place into a higher level of a language class. But so that's the theory behind that, is that all students have a heterogeneous class in their 9th and 10th grade year.
And I'm just not clear on what the benefit is. Like, you're saying that there's a benefit to that, but can you paint a more detailed picture about what that benefit is?
I think that's a long conversation. It certainly is about the difference between tracking students and having tracks for honors and having them be in mixed level classes. I can say that one of the things that we did this year was that we shifted the 12th grade classes. In the past few years, the 12th grade English classes have been quite separated. It was very easy to see the tracking that was happening. They shifted to heterogeneous classes in the 12th grade English, and are just seeing a huge benefit for all of the students, having a variety of students in there, a variety of backgrounds, variety of perspectives, while still being able to push kids at their own level.
That's the point where I hear different opinions about pushing kids at their own level. I hear that in the honors option social studies classes, a lot of high achieving students actually get bored and they're not challenged enough. Mm-hmm. That's why I'm raising the question, why do we do this? And is the benefit enough to outweigh the cost to the students who don't feel the challenge?
I mean, it's certainly something to discuss moving forward. I think it's a big discussion. It's a philosophical discussion about heterogeneous classes versus tracking. Honors classes, we see the kids that are, they spend their entire day together. And there's benefits and downfalls to that. Anytime that you have tracking, it's natural that their high school schedule then fits this honors class to this honors class, or this remedial class to this remedial class, which is a different philosophy than heterogeneous classes. And so it's certainly a conversation to explore, but it's a big one.
So just so I can clearly understand what the discussion about. So Earth Science, there's a college prep section and then there's an honors section. So they're completely separate classes.
Yes, Valerie was asking about history. Though.
Right. No, I'm
Social
just
studies.
trying to
Yeah.
understand. So in some of the like science, there's two separate sections, whereas in global studies, they're all in the same classroom, but they're sort of extension work. So the honors option to do more.
Yes.
Okay, but they're all in this. Okay.
Yep.
I just wasn't.
And so some schools have all heterogeneous classes and they have no honors classes and only have an honors option.
Yeah.
Some schools have completely separate tracks, and we have both. So all 9th graders experience and 10th graders experience that heterogeneous class.
I would like to ask that we do have that discussion at a later time. I think it's incredibly important, and I understand it's a philosophical discussion, but I'd also like to see some data as to how the heterogeneous classrooms are benefiting different levels of students. I think it's something that our community will be very interested in hearing, and I think it's an important retention question.
All right.
Yeah, just one final thought on that. At the lower levels, we don't track students, but we try really hard to differentiate. I think by the time you get to high school, the teachers are not as focused on differentiation, so you don't get the extensions and the challenges throughout the year. You just have this one project that lasts 1 month over the course of the whole year, and that's your honors option. So it's not, it's not equivalent to differentiating throughout the year and challenging kids to do the most they can do on a consistent basis.
Jen.
I just forgot to add it when I spoke before. I think that it's fantastic that you added that unified PE. I think that's really great. And I think that could possibly be something that, I guess maybe they already do it, but if other schools, but like it would be kind of cool if Freeport like started that and it was something that other schools followed. And I think if you called the class gym-phobic, you might have also gotten a good response. Total Sculpt sounds nice, but
Sculpt sounds even way above, right?
Yeah, that sounds intimidating.
Right.
Yeah.
I had intro to weightlifting, and nobody liked that
Oh,
one.
no. Yeah, no. I think he would scare people off with that one.
Yeah.
All right. Are we good with the program of studies?
This is a lot.
Thank you, Jen.
I love the artwork on the front.
I know the artwork's fantastic. Okay, so 10B, consideration and approval to change March 16th, 2018 Professional Learning Day to a student day on the 2017-2018 school calendar.
So currently, we're at Thursday, June 21st as our last day of school. And so I guess I'm just a little concerned that we could still have a couple of more snow days. And what we're really not wanting to have happen is to go into that next week of the
July 4th.
Yeah, July 4th. Yeah,
Please
almost.
don't do
It feels like
Please.
that.
I'm begging you.
June 25th, and as you remember back in October, that when we had those 2 days, I think it was October 30th and 31st, that we did bring the staff in and we had a workshop day. So so I want you to just kind of consider moving that date in March to a student day. And of course, communication is key, so that's why I'm bringing it tonight, so that we have time to communicate to all the families.
Dolly.
So Becky, if we were to do that, will we reschedule the Professional Learning Day to another day, and what day would that be?
So we did in reschedule it to another day. It was back October 31st. So, right, because
the kids didn't go, but the teachers came in.
The kids did not go on that Tuesday, but I had all the staff come in, already thinking ahead to that, because that was so early to have 2 days. So if you leave the calendar as is, we would probably do an invitation only and have some staff come in on that March 16th day. So we would have, I know there's work at the high school that could be done around NEASC. There might be work around big ideas, but because the staff have already come in on October 31st, they've been paid for that day. So my options is, if we leave the calendar as is, staff won't come in on March 16th. But if we do have some staff that we feel like could benefit, we could pay, they'll be paid an additional day.
What I don't understand is if it's a student day, then all the staff will be working. So how would they be?
But they would be a
coming
day
by
shorter at the end of the year.
invitation? Okay.
We would go from the 21st to the 20th.
Correct.
Okay.
That would be with no more snow days. That's a
an
big
ex-
if.
Now,
Extremely optimistic view of the weather.
Didn't we have some consultants coming in on that day? Wasn't there some big workshop prepared for that day?
Yeah, you could, yeah, I think we would
Math?
still do some release time.
Yes, that's what we're doing.
Microphone.
So how will we get that consulting help delivered to the staff at a different time?
There will still come, and even though it's a student day, we have about 10 middle school, 10, let's see, how many are at your school, Ray, math teachers? 5. So there'll be 10 teachers involved, still involved in 2 days of, 1 day of professional development with big ideas. We have it all. We have a backup plan depending on what happens tonight. So 5 of them would be released from their classrooms on Thursday and 5 on Friday, and we would be doing a lab classroom setting. So that's way involved for this discussion, but so we have that as our backup plan. Otherwise, he's still coming on. If you don't decide to do this, he would still be coming on Thursday, and it looks a little different. So we have 2 plans going.
But either way, they will get the
they're
professional
still,
development.
Yes, either way, they're
Okay.
still getting the big ideas.
So if we don't, meaning if we do change it back to a student day, then there'll be subs.
Correct.
To cover for the release time.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Any other questions? Yes, you could do that. Go ahead. What's your motion?
In consideration and approval to change the March 16, 2018 professional learning day to a student day on the 2017-2018 school calendar.
And the second from Kate. Thank you. Any other discussions? All those in favor? None opposed? Thank you. Okay. New business C, while we're on the calendar, consideration and approval for the 2018-2019 school calendar first read.
So Cynthia will speak to that.
So you see in your memo that pretty much the calendar layout is the same as last year. It starts after Labor Day. We still have the same number of PLD days. The only change that we made to our PLD is we moved our November date to February 15th. Through discussion with administration, we decided that we wanted to spread it out so we had a constant, so there was continuity and flow, so it wasn't just all in the fall. And so the other addition that you'll see on our calendar is, in addition to maintaining our December early release day, we are asking to add 1 more day on May 8th. And so that continues with that flow throughout for the professional development to happen throughout the year. Those 2 early release days, we chose Wednesdays because they line up with staff meeting day so that we can get more time, so that the principals can have more time with their staffs. So there's that extra hour there. And the other thing to note is that we meet with the other schools that feed into Region 10, Brunswick and Topsom, and so we've met 2 times. We can only have 5 dissimilar days, and we have 4 with this plan. So that works out well. And one of the considerations for our early release day is we paired that up with Brunswick, who has 5 early release days, but we chose. We already had that December one in common, and we chose the May one to match up with theirs so that our Region 10 students don't have another off day. So that lines up with them.
Because Region 10 follows Brunswick's schedule.
Correct.
So when Brunswick has an early release, then Region 10 has an early release?
So
what about Thompson?
Basically, all three of us together, all four of us together meet, and all of our kids meet. So the three of us actually decide the calendars, and we give them to Region 10. So that's how that works. It's not just Brunswick. It lines up.
Oh.
So sometimes they're not having all of their students there at Region 10s. If they have an early, for example, in Topsom, they do a couple of late starts, so their kids aren't there, but ours are all there. Brunswick's are there and ours are there.
So pretty much with Region 10, whatever Brunswick does, that's what the Region 10 kids do.
So like if they have 5 early release days, we have 2 on those 3 off days that so Region 10 would release them early?
So whatever Brunswick does, that's what Region 10 does. So most recently, to give you an example, is that Brunswick needed a 2-hour delay to get the sidewalks all cleared off, and our students did not attend Region 10 in the morning because all Region 10 classes were canceled for the morning.
Have there been any discussions about a 3-way conversation on how to get the Region 10 calendar to align not just with Brunswick but with the 3 districts?
I'm not sure how you do that.
I mean, pretty much that's what they're striving for. But on a day where we don't make the same decision, or as Cynthia pointed out, there are days that are dissimilar, you've got to follow somebody's calendar. And so it's just been decided that they'll follow Brunswick's. And so we go with it, and our high school administration is really good about adapting.
What are the dissimilar days?
Okay. So I have this nice chart. Okay, so January 2nd. Oh, let me start back at the beginning. All right. I guess January 2nd is one of them, the first one. Okay, November. All right, January 2nd. That is the first one. And then the 15th of February. The May 28th, because that's Topsom has a professional development day that day. And then one of the days at the beginning of the year, and then the last day of school is different. So Brunswick has 176 days, but that doesn't count. So they have a professional day at the beginning of the year that we don't have before school starts. And then the last day of school, let's see which one gets out. One of them gets out earlier. I think it's Topsom. Yes, the 14th. So we have the last day. We have ours is a student day on the 14th. The other 2 districts are finished on the 13th.
But we all start the same day?
Right after Labor Day.
Oh, is it the PLD day on the 2nd that throws it off?
And there's some different PLD days, but the early release days don't count as different days because they're going to school still.
So that's the January 2nd. I'm curious how that went this year. Just as a parent, I don't like that day.
Okay.
They've been off on vacation and everybody needs to like get back to work and things, and it's, oh no, one more day. And now it's a Wednesday, which means they don't go back for only for 2 more days that week. I don't love that one.
So we didn't have a survey to get that kind of data, but we did get lots of data from the principals, and 2 of them are here that they could speak to that. But the overall teacher feeling.
We're not sure which one she's not counting, but one of you doesn't count.
3. Oh, I'm sorry. Did you leave? So, Will, come on up. Yeah, sure.
I would echo Michelle's sentiment on that one, and not only about that one, but also about the February one. We have so many late starts, early seasons nowadays, as is. Just throwing those extra no school days, no student days during the winter, it creates a really disruptive pattern for the kids to get in and get out of school and get into school mode.
You talk about February 15th?
Right.
So 2 years ago, February 15th, or that Friday, was what the half day was.
And we eliminated it because we had so many snow days that year that the following year you said, no, we can't do that again. So I'm remembering, I don't want to go back to that because there's a reason why we took it out to begin with.
And I think the only reason we put it in February is, the only reason we have it in February is for that continuity, so that it's about once a month that we're having that PLD. Will, you want to come up and just give comment on January 2nd?
Usually allowed to speak after 8:30. So there were 2 parts to it. What Cynthia was just saying in terms of trying to spread the PD time out throughout the year was one factor, and then doing that by trying to be responsive on that Friday, for example, of if families were trying to travel or go away, that then it would be less disruptive than if it was some other week. But in terms of the the January one, just in terms of the informal feedback that we all received in the schools, because we were unsure about it also, was that people actually the staff really liked it. It gave them an opportunity to come in and, in essence, regroup. And for example, our school teachers were going through student data to that point and really kind of like setting themselves up for the upcoming stretch of school. And then because they're teachers, a lot of them then stayed and did things in their rooms in that afternoon, or sort of prepared, in essence, doing things that they would do over their vacation, and but that they not necessarily the student data piece, but in terms of the other facets in their room that they chose to do. So teachers actually were surprisingly, they found that time surprisingly useful. I think everyone went in a little skeptical and came out pleasantly surprised at how useful and productive the time was. And I think it just made a difference the next day when the children came back. I'm speaking for one of you, but I'm not sure which one it is.
Ray and Jen, do you want to add anything or give us any feedback that you heard that day that might be helpful for the...
I mean, I think I could see why it would be helpful from a teacher perspective to ease back in. But I think the other side of the equation is the 1,800 kids' parents.
Yeah, I like my kids. I like them being at home. So.
Nope, not me.
Well, and in
now on
addition,
record.
it is a Wednesday now, so are we going back for a 2-day week and then have a weekend?
Like November, like the Thanksgiving?
No, because Thanksgiving you go away at the end of the week and you have the 3 days. This is a 2-week day now. Thanksgiving is a 3. Well, no, actually, yeah, it's a 2-day week.
Two at the front. But I mean, like, they're gone for 2 weeks. They come back for 2 days, then they have another weekend. I mean, it seems a little choppy to me. Like, I get it when it was a Monday, Tuesday, and then they have 3 days. I don't know. I don't know why one more day seems logical to me and 2 doesn't. Just keep shaking your head at me, Naomi. But I don't like that one, for the record.
I'm nodding to you, Michelle.
So what would the board suggest?
Kate.
I don't like the PLD day after December break. I don't like the PLD day in February, and I don't like February vacation.
Just gonna throw it all out there.
I don't want to hear it, okay?
I was with you until then.
So just think though, if you get rid of February vacation, you're out a week earlier.
Right. June 7th.
Isn't basketball play into that? Isn't that basketball that plays into that, right?
If we get rid of February vacation, I'm okay with putting the PLD day in February.
Lindsay.
I think I'll throw a new point into the discussion. The PLD day, February the 15th, my impression of the professional development was like you learn something new, you get refocused, you get pumped up, and then you apply it. And I think it's really hard when you're trying to implement new things to have to go to have this the space of an entire vacation, and then you're gonna like. I just think it's really hard to apply something that you heard about or thought about a week ago.
Yeah, it kind of depends on what that PLD is. It could give them time to, read more up about it and plan for it. Or, it really
During the
is.
vacation week, though?
It's dependent on what it is that day.
So what I would say, what you're describing is what, sometimes I refer to as like popcorn staff development that has occurred in schools through the ages that we are trying to move away from. So you learn something new in February, and then you learn something else new in March. That, we're trying to move away from that and have like a focus on math. And, it would be, what is our next step in implementing big ideas? It's not as if they're learning some brand new concept and then they're waiting for a week. So we're trying to make it more systemic. The high school has been using a lot of their PLD days for like NEASC. So it's a continuation, or we're going deeper into the units of study at the elementary level. So it's not, don't think of it as like brand new learning.
So how soon do we need to approve this? Because I'm more comfortable waiting to get more information about other things that are going on before we approve a calendar.
What info are you waiting on?
Well, hopefully that we can do extended days or some other kind of professional development.
Yeah, that might. Well, yeah, I'm not sure we want to bank on.
No, I'm not banking on anything. I'm just asking, do we have a deadline? When do we? I mean, we could make a better decision
September
if we were
1st.
more informed.
The state, it has to be into the state early May.
Early May.
Yeah, but
Okay.
typically they're approved around March.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if our concern is around the timing of the PLD days, my understanding from what you're saying is those are the days they're already off from Brunswick and Topsom. So if we move them somewhere else, they're still off.
Correct. You're absolutely correct.
So
They
we
are
could move those and not go
those
out
2
of
days.
compliance with our agreement with 10.
That is
right?
correct.
Would it be possible for you guys to show us another option?
If
with
you would
maybe
like that, I can bring that back.
I don't want to speak for the board, but if a fair number of us would like to see that, then I think that's a fair request to ask.
Well, just be specific in your request, like, of which days you want us to move, because, we just need some guidance. And I just want you to hear what we're saying about, as an administrative team, that it's important when you're trying to implement change that you don't have all of the days in the fall, and then you're not having an opportunity to say, wow, we just did that instructional walkthrough and this is what we discovered. So that's the reason the administrative team went with, we need some time to come back together and work with the staff on a monthly basis.
Yes, I hear you. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Jen.
My only thing is that I always kind of think, I'm looking to the administrative team who who spent all the time with this and has all the information about why they choose these days, kind of like what Becky said. And I feel very strongly that we could spend hours and hours and hours debating, I'm with Naomi, I like that day, but you don't. To me, this is not a personal thing. This is these administrators have come up with this as what they consider the best possible calendar. So I feel like even if there's another one that we come up with, you're going to have a split again with, so I just look towards the people that I feel kind of know what they're doing when they create this, and I feel comfortable with what they've come up with.
I just like to make sure that they recognize the impact not only on the teachers, but also on everybody else that's impacted by the calendar. Kate.
I don't think anybody mentioned this either, but
you want to get rid of Christmas vacation?
Yes, I do. I just want to get rid of it all.
We could be done in
no
April.
breaks.
Summer's out.
Yeah. Okay.
Going on.
Ben's like, I quit.
So in general, I don't have a big issue with early release, except for how we seem to be implementing it. I really don't like us packing the full day into a half a day at the middle school and the high school. And so unless we're planning to change that, I don't like the early releases. But while we're talking about early release, I just was wondering if maybe that's a good place to, like going into vacation, if putting an early release day in place of February 15th or something.
I also would like to suggest on the early release that we consider doing late starts for the middle and high school instead of early release. So do a 2-hour late start, which is what they do in many other districts, instead of the 3-hour early release. I mean, the biorhythm of kids at that age is much more productive in the afternoon. So it would be moving us towards to recognizing that kids learn better in the afternoon when they're teenagers, and also just making the day not be 3 hours short, but 2 hours short. So rather than have 2 3-hour early release days for the middle and high school, I would rather see 3 2-hour late starts for those two schools.
May I address Kate's concern about the high school schedule during those days, because we've talked about that, and so I brought Jen up to kind of address that.
So that's consistent with any time that we have a shortened day schedule. Our operations team has looked at that pretty closely and has decided that and got feedback from our teachers that they would rather see all of their classes for a short amount of time. So this coming Friday is our Spirit Day, as Ben said. And so anytime that we have an adjusted schedule, we see all of our classes, because if we didn't, due to our rotating schedule, you then wouldn't see that class for another 2 days. And so teachers are feeling like that really breaks continuity. So if Monday's a maroon day and Wednesday was a shortened day and you didn't see a class, then you would go from Monday to Friday until you've had that class again. And so if we did not have an alternating day schedule, it might be that we would reconsider and just have full-length fewer classes, but the teachers have felt pretty strongly about that that's a detriment to kids, that they would go Monday to Friday potentially and not see those teachers.
And definitely we could look at not doing a half day, but just do a early release of 2 hours. I think currently we did 3.5.
Right, we did half days, right?
Yeah.
We could do early release. Doesn't
we could.
mean it has to be a half
That's
day,
correct.
right?
Yeah.
Especially for the middle and high school, where they do have that compacted schedule. 1 hour makes a difference, a big difference. So the kids feel like, okay, they've had
It's another
class.
10 minutes at every class or 15
Right.
minutes at every class. Maddie?
Like Valley's idea about late start for the teens. I also like Kate's idea about looking at, sorry Ben, undoing February break. We come from
Talk about out of compliance with the rest.
well, in Texas they have 1 week. They have March off, and you get a slightly longer holiday break in the winter, and you get out a little earlier. I know you're from Texas too. You
I know,
probably
well-
disagree, but
No, I think it is a New England thing, but that is definitely something we would need to approach and get buy-in from all 3 districts.
You have more than
because
5 days right
That would
away.
send us way out of
Well,
compliance.
in the whole, the whole state of Maine. I mean,
Basketball,
right,
I
the
know.
basketball and, whew.
How many kids
you know,
are on the
it-
basketball team? Release them. I mean, they get released for other stuff. Naomi.
So Valley, you were saying the elementary kids wouldn't have the late start. They would have the early release.
Yeah.
So
you-
how would busing work with
So
something
basically,
like
you switch. So for the morning, the bus comes and picks up the elementary kids at the regular time, and then goes back around and picks up the high school and middle school, which would be an hour or 2 later. I don't know. And then you go to the reverse in the afternoon.
that would be my only concern is logistics. If the bus runs would be able to
Would
fit
work
all
that way.
Well, I do worry about families that may have multiple siblings and does the older sibling provide the daycare? I don't know. I've never seen that done, but it's interesting.
Yep. And that doesn't necessarily impact what we're voting on now, right? So an early release could be the same, we could call it a shortened day and decide what's the best avenue to reach that, like whether it's late start or early release.
But if we do, if we vote on a shortened day, do we need to know whether it's shortened by 2 hours or 3 hours, or we just do a shortened day and then we decide, and if it's 2 hour shorter, then we need to add another shortened day so that they get the full amount of hours that they want, or it doesn't matter?
I think we
No,
just
I don't-
decide if
I
we
don't-
want 3 or 2. I mean,
Right. I'm not sure. I think right now we're requesting the 2 days, and if we change the hours, we're still going to make do with that. Right.
Kate.
So if we kept the 2 shortened days, I still would be in favor of those being like maybe leading into a vacation week. Because, sorry, but not much happens at school on those days anyway. That last day going into vacation, it's kind of a party for my kids, or watching a movie, or it's not all that productive anyway. So I'm not seeing how that would impact, even if they were doing like the very condensed schedule at the high school. I think it would be lessen the impact actually if you're leading into vacation anyway.
So I'm wondering then why we're opposed to the day before vacation being a full day. With that rationale.
Because
If-
it doesn't count as a student day. And you already are very
So
limited on
basically,
student
you want to
days
take
in
that
February.
PLD day, make it a early release day instead of a PLD day.
Yeah.
So don't move PLD somewhere else. Just make it early release.
Well, you could move the PLD somewhere else, but I'm trying to see how you can gain student days in February because there are very few.
Oh,
With
okay.
snow days
So
and-
it really is more the concern about just the February day.
Yes. Because
Right.
of
Okay.
all the snow days, and it seems we lose a lot of student days in February.
And April, we've already got a day before that one, so we can't add something before that. We've got the professional compensation day.
I just want to remind you about the early release. The reason that we chose that day is because it lines up with Brunswick, and it would impact our Region 10 students.
Right. But they have 3 others that we don't have, so, right? So,
But if we
But if
change
it's
that
not that day,
PLD
yep.
to an early release before February, right? Is that what you're saying? Like, then it would count as a student day.
Yep.
And it's already against what they have anyway.
right. So that's why I'm saying we could move the PLD days and not get farther out of compliance
Right.
because those already don't match.
And the other reason that they were put on those particular days is because those line up with staff meetings, so there's an extra hour.
So I'm curious about what is the board's pleasure about where to move what month you want the February day in.
And the January day, too.
Well, to me, if we move the January day, if we come back with something where that January 2nd day is moved, it's probably going to be moved in January. somewhere.
I mean, if we like adding them to long weekends to give people more long weekend time, I mean, what about November 9th?
We moved it from there. Well, the reason that we moved it from there is not only to spread it out, but the administration felt that it was too close right off. There wasn't time for, we have a lot of days off in November already.
So the January day is only a half-day professional learning day.
Mm-hmm.
So
currently,
could we move that to make a half school day and half professional day the day before February vacation? And then we only have to relocate one professional day, full day.
Okay.
And then
So-
the Wednesday the 2nd of January will be a student day, full student day.
So we'll put the team back together and we'll bring you an option. And what I'm hearing is that it's the January day and the February day that you are most concerned about. I don't want to try to solve it here.
Yep, no, I think you're right. Yep. Yes.
Not related. I'd like to see, but related to the calendar, I'd like to see us start calling October 8th Indigenous Peoples Day instead of Columbus Day.
Is that a state?
So many towns are moving to it. I don't think it's a state thing yet, but I think our students would appreciate that, and I think it's more current thinking. I think as a district, we should be aligned with the way the culture is moving.
All right. You'll do some thinking on that too.
Okay.
All right. Anything else on the calendar?
Just to clarify, our charge is to look at January 2nd and February 15th only.
Yeah, I don't think there was any issue with any of the others.
Thank you. I was just really referring to the early release.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, what are we doing with the early release? Are we asking them to figure out if we can do a 2-day release or a late start? Or, I mean, I do want to continue that conversation.
I don't think I don't think that needs to be part of this discussion per se. But I think we all want to know what you come up with on that.
Right. That's what I meant.
Yeah.
So that is an item of discussion for the team.
Yeah.
The early release days as well.
Okay, so we need to vote on the first read. Well, the same way we do on policies, right? I mean, we vote on them to move them to a second read pursuant to the conversation, I think, right?
Yep.
Okay, so consideration and approval to the 2018-2019 school calendar first read. Naomi, second. Jen, all those in favor? Opposed? No. You guys good over there? You're giving me confused looks. Okay. 10, new business D, consideration and approval of policy, is it 11B, 11B, IIB? Okay. IIB.
Different districts have different codes for that because it's not a mandated policy. So it follows one of the other districts. Okay, so in your packet, it's the green handout. So the policy committee meeting, you have it in your memo. It's green. So the policy committee began meeting in November, and we've met, I think, 3 to 4 times on this policy. I think I mentioned last time I wasn't sure if we'd be back at this point, but we were able to come to consensus at our policy committee meeting. So the language was the first thing that we tackled. So we looked at several policies, sample policies, and looked at language that everybody felt really comfortable with. And so that's where we started. We drafted that. We looked at it again, made a couple of revisions to it. And then at the last meeting, in February, Groundhog's Day, we looked at the grade span. You can see that in the policy in the center, the grade level span. We decided to focus on student to teacher ratios Pre-K itself is already dictated in law that you have a 16-to-1 ratio, and the asterisk denotes that in Chapter 124 that for pre-K students you have to have it's an 8-to-1 adult ratio, student to adult ratio, so you have to have a certified ed tech in a pre-K classroom. And so with grade K, we landed on an 18-to-1. 1 through 2, grades 1 and 2 is 22-1, and then 3 to 5 and 6 to 8 was 22 to 1. So if you look at the language, it really gives you some prescription on how this would work should a number be outside of that range. If you take a look at the paragraph that starts when, it's below the graphic. It's the last paragraph on that first page. So when an elementary or middle school class size clearly exceeds, and I will be inserting the words the student-teacher ratio by 2 or more students, or any high school course falls below a 5-to-1 ratio, the principal will notify the superintendent, and then the superintendent, in consultation with the principal, shall consider all options to resolve the issue. And then the options may include, then they're listed below, but they're not limited to, maybe the decision is that the class size stays the same. As is. And maybe assigning additional staff. It could be an ed tech, transferring some students to a different class, or for the high school, canceling the course. So there's that caveat there. And then the classes that would have a higher size or that's allowable would be those classes like at the high school that would be chorus and band and those typically larger classrooms. Special education students, of course, they would follow the teacher-student ratio that is under law. And so on the last paragraph, it says the superintendent's decision would be then communicated once there's a trigger of we're over this number or we're 2 over this number. Then after that conversation, whatever that decision is, the superintendent would communicate that with the board, and with the understanding that we would still need board approval if we were to hire additional staff. So that really summarizes the policy that the policy committee came up with. We, at our last meeting, had 3 of the principals there, and they gave some testimonials to why they're very supportive of this policy for a variety of reasons. It could be, this happens in August, and you're going, if you hire another teacher for 1 extra student, then that could create a multitude of concerns. You're trying to get the best staff hires that you can. Your master schedule would change dramatically with specials and all that. There's PLC and professional work that's happening within the schools that would be impacted. So it has a larger impact depending on when that 1 extra student would come in. So that was one testimonial that we heard. I don't know if Will wants to add anything, but I guess I'll just leave that out for you right now, and then if you have...
I'm just a little unclear. I understand what you're saying about the impacts, but is there a section of this that talks about timing? Like, how does that apply, what you just said?
Right.
Where does that apply?
That was just an example. So whenever it would happen, like all of a sudden you get 4 new students that come in and register in, August, or if you know that in May, you've already, like some people are already saying, we're coming, and they're registering. The principals already know that some others are coming. So there's one principal that is already having conversations with Dr. Foley, and they're discussing that, as they have already and always been doing. So it's not so black and white, I guess, and we feel like this policy allows for those conversations to happen and the best decision to be made given that specific set of circumstances.
We said in here that this would serve as a general guide for organization. In our discussions, we weren't going down the road of saying this is the way it is kind of thing.
Right.
So I appreciate the fact that you're trying to address the need for flexibility, and that was certainly part of the discussion. At the same time, the reason why we initiated the discussion about having this policy is because we want to basically establish some guidelines that are, in my personal opinion, a safeguard against classes getting overly large. And I think that the policy that came out of the committee is a little too ambiguous and a little too flexible. So there are some changes that I would like to see in the second draft. And I can go into those changes now, or I can just let other people speak first. But before we vote on it, I want to make some amendments.
Yeah. Do we have questions before we start sort of talking about the pros and cons of the policy itself? Are there any questions about what this says, just so we know? Maybe this answers.
It's just the handout that you've
this
had
is
before, just in case you
class
wanted
size
to refer to
policies
it.
for the other districts. Okay.
Yeah.
One question I had was 3 through 5 and 6 through 8 have the same numbers. Was there a
Yes.
reason you distinguished? Is it because one's middle school and one's?
Yes.
Okay.
We could have just written 3 through 8.
Okay, I wasn't sure if there was a distinction.
I think originally we had it was divided differently, and when it went to the principals, they suggested these changes, and so I think that's probably why it was separated like that.
Okay.
Wait, so the principals suggested changes? Like, what were the nature of the changes?
Just the configurations. There were just like one grade level. The numbers were adjusted in a couple of grade levels and brought back to the committee. Not at the middle school.
Mm-hmm.
I think at one time the 18 was, I think the K1 was together.
Yes, it was.
And principals really felt like 20-1 in first grade is fine. So it was separated out like that.
And I think third grade may have been with second.
So it's K1, 2, 3, and then 4, 5?
Yeah. And we didn't put high school in because high school we addressed
separately.
Yeah.
Does this policy here, if we overlaid this today, what would that look like?
I have a handout in case you ask that question.
Oh, look at that. Thought I was throwing a curveball.
No! All right, so what I'm handing out to you is, remember a few board meetings ago, the presentation that Dr. Foley had the projected enrollments in it. So this is what you're going to see here, these numbers, and I'll explain it in a minute.
Good luck with that.
I'll wait till you all have it before I speak to him. So there have been 1 or 2 small changes, and I'll address those from when the slide was presented to you. So what you're seeing is the configurations for each of the schools, and if you look at FY18 at the bottom of this graphic, it has our current staffing, and I just want to make a correction. Instead of 23 for Durham, it should say 24 on both of those. My apologies. I must
Is this
have
projected
forgot
for
pre-K.
19?
So-
Oh, no. This is the 18-19 year.
This is
September
this
of
is
18.
projected for this coming
So
fall.
upcoming year.
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
So when I had FY18, that's just what our current teachers are for each of the schools. And then for what is being presented to you and what's up showing here for enrollment, it's exactly the same. So there would be no additional staffing. And so what I've highlighted in the blue for you is when you look at the policy that we're presenting tonight, those would be like the watches, where we would be watching. And I just want to also make one correction. When I saw Will's report tonight that he gave, it looks like in grade 1 he had 2 teachers. They must be down 1 student. You're down. It says 40 on your class enrollment for a grade going into grade 1. So if you have that handout, so they would be 2 classes of 20 instead of 1 at 20 and 1 at 21 to line up with yours.
If you're locking that in right now, that's
That poor kindergartner just got cut.
Yeah. So what I had done when I got these numbers, I had called every secretary who had the latest numbers and verified what is like in present time, not October 1st date, but in present time. And so I just noticed, Will's, I did read your report ahead of time, but I didn't look at your numbers as carefully. And so that was just a difference. So I think what he's saying is it could be 20 to 21, but to match up with his sheet, it would be 2 20s. And then the Mass Landing School, we're watching that anyway. Dr. Foley and Emily have had conversations. So we're watching that anyway because they've had a couple of people come in and register. So we're already on top of that. And then, Dr. Foley, did you want to talk about the Pownell number for kindergarten? That blue shaded. I'm not sure how you want to address that.
You know, some of the so that's a good example of where I have had discussions with Lisa Dimick, and some of those students are from Freeport attending Pownell. And, you know, her recommendation is that she wants to keep them all, and she's fine with the 20 there. And we might put some additional, this would be an example of where we might put some additional just ed tech hours in there at strategic times during the day. You know, my other option is to say to the Freeport families, you know, oh, you're going to have to go back to your community school. But I think, you know, currently she, you know, this is a good example of why we want flexibility in the policy, because there are older siblings at that school that have been in that school, and she doesn't necessarily want to take those 20 and divide it by 3 and have 6 and something. Mm-hmm. We don't want to cut a kid in two. Right. I don't think that's allowed. Last I checked in the statute.
No PR is bad PR, but I think that might be bad PR.
Yeah. So I think that's just a good example of why we really want flexibility. So currently, my best thinking, Lisa's best thinking on that one is we want to keep those families at Pownell that want to be there, and we'll probably put some additional ed tech support in there.
So I just, if I could, mathematically, it also changing that 24 brings the current and the bottom numbers to 74. And then Will would like to also speak, if that would be okay.
So, I was just going to mention that, in a way, when Cynthia was just talking about the 2021 for us going into first grade, that's an example of what Emily Graham from Mass Landing and Lisa Dimick at Pownell and Julie Nickerson, we were talking about it, that when those numbers get to that point, and with the policy how it's been sort of drafted, that you know, we would, if it got to 22, at that point it triggers a required conversation with Dr. Foley. but it might be at 22 and the needs of that particular group. We're having that conversation before then, that we are saying, because of the nature of this cohort, and you see that in our numbers each year, we have a group of 46 in 3 classes and a group of 46 in 2 classes because of the nature of the cohort and their level of need for one reason or another, or the level of support that's currently available. Some of the unintended consequences was what we had gone to just present to the policy team working on this, that with all good intention can sometimes have a bit of a detrimental effect. So a couple of pieces that were shared there were, and I'll take this first grade as an example, if we got to 22, to put them into 3 classes of 14, 15, which we're fortunate to have in kindergarten, but to try and hire a person at that point in time. Our curriculum models as a district are really now very well established with Teachers College work for Readers and Writers Workshop, our everyday math work. You're not just picking up qualified, trained people. It's a scramble to get them in April, let alone trying to get somebody in August or July. And all of us would prefer, I think we may have smaller numbers, but the group of children who have that new teacher who isn't so familiar or experienced, they may be having a lesser experience than if they were in a slightly bigger class with a trained, qualified teacher who's familiar with the RSU 5 expectations and practices. And so the solution there may not be an extra teacher, but the solution there may be what level of support do we need? And then that often is driven by the cohort of the children. So one of the things you don't see necessarily just in the numbers, which I know we have mentioned previously, is if, for example, we had 44 children and 22 in a class, but within that we had maybe 5 students who were getting some additional special education support during their math time, for example. Those math classes are now 20. Or if it was during literacy and there was push-in support for those children, that corresponds to different small group work and strategy work that can take place in the class. So it's not quite, and with all due respect, I fully understand and we appreciate the intent of the board to support children and teachers with manageable class sizes. And also, Vali, as you say, our intention is not to let these somehow creep up. We're not in the business of trying to just maximize the sizes at all. But there are some other impacts, and one in particular, Emily Grimm from Mars Landing here brought up was around specials, for example. By adding in another class, that's another section for specials, and either there's another specials teacher required to fit classes into the rotation, or there's less specials. There's just a lot of ramifications from just adding a class. And so all we're really asking is that we understand and fully respect the intentions of the board to keep class sizes a small and attractive number, but really want to have that flexibility to be able to work with the superintendent and certainly keeping the board informed so that we have the ability to look at all those variables that exist and what those knock-on effects would be. And certainly if it's like, this is what we have to do, it makes all the sense to have a smaller class because of these factors, and this is how we accommodate it, then we'd be the first to get in line to ask for it. But we just want to make sure that we're not triggering a set response just on one number without respect to all the other variables. Thank you.
Maddie.
Are we still asking questions, or can we discuss?
Oh, you can go ahead.
Great. I appreciate the need for flexibility, and I appreciate hearing those detailed situations. I'm concerned that the steps suggested in the paragraph that starts with when any elementary or middle school, that does not include the board of directors. Because just as I appreciate hearing from Will now, I would like to have the opportunity to hear about those situations. I'd like to see, I think it's in the best interest of our community for more transparency, that the superintendent also bring those situations to the board.
And I had that concern too, but I think the last sentence says that their decision on any discussion that she has triggered by this response here, she then brings and communicates to us. Now, because my first thought was it only needed to come to us if they needed additional staff, and maybe that's a clarification question for the policy group and how they wrote it. When I reread it, my thought was, okay, they come to us for any discussion.
Here's why I'd like to see us hear about it earlier.
Okay.
Parents may want to weigh in on that conversation, especially if it's a very particular situation. And if we're not hearing about it until a decision has been made, then we truly are putting them in a difficult situation where they've already made a staffing or a course decision, and then the public's weighing in after the fact, and then they've got to go back and perhaps undo something they've already done. I just think it's in the interest of our district that for greater transparency that we're hearing about these things at the board level.
I definitely agree that we need to be hearing about them. Because that was my first thought on it, was we need more, what's the teeth in that it comes to us, but Jeremy.
I agree. Just the way I read it, it's like, the decision we made, and then, oh, by the way, this is what I did. And I didn't like that, the feel of that flow.
And it almost happened that way just because of the page break. Like, maybe if it was all on one page, it wouldn't have felt that way, but it did feel that way.
Yep.
I can shrink the font.
No, I think it's good.
Maddie's like, please don't make it smaller.
I always make it large. I can't see.
And guys, second question. Just how did the 22, how did these numbers come to be, if you will? Where did those numbers get landed on from?
Well, you have the pink sheet in front of you, but also all of the principals have had classes of 20, 21, 22 in their buildings, sometimes more. And so they really looked at each grade level and felt strongly that these numbers made sense.
And fully appreciating that, and I know it's on the watch list, but we've got a class of 23 projected.
Right.
It seems like this policy is, going to allow that overtime creep of happening if accepted as written, because this class of 23 wouldn't come to our attention with the policy as written.
So,
right.
Yeah.
That's fair.
And I think Dr. Foley's brought it to you twice, this one.
Yeah, I don't argue with
the way
if you're following the policy. It would not require me to bring that to your attention. I mean, obviously we do, when we're building the budget, we're being totally transparent with this is our projection on that.
And we also see it when you skip the numbers in October, right? When
Right,
you
but
guys
that
do
would
your
be too
counts.
late. That would be too late. I mean, with I think what I'm hearing from the board, right?
But I'm just saying, we see the set class sizes throughout the year before we make decisions on budget.
That's correct.
Okay.
But if we're setting the guideline at 22, then 23 becomes almost like acceptable, if you will, within acceptable range.
Yeah, and I would like to add that the way the policy is written, you can get to the 22, but it says the conversation doesn't need to begin until you clearly exceed by 2 or more students. So you don't really begin the conversation until you're at 24.
Right. That was, I think that's his point. 23 you'd never hear about because it doesn't. But I think it does come back to what Will said about, they know their classes, they know their cohorts, and it could be that they had a class of 22, which is clearly within the policy that they may still come and ask for support for. And I think we've seen that historically they have done that.
Exactly.
And they may have a class of 21 and come to Dr. Foley.
Well,
because there's other.
I mean, there could be a class
other
of 18.
reasons.
Right.
All right. So we've had a situation in a school with with like the special ed population, and we're way within the range of acceptable ratios for the special ed population, and we've made the decision to split the class based upon needs. So, a part of it really does come down to trust, and you want to write a policy that gives some guidelines that you're kind of comfortable with, but there are classes that are challenging at 15, right? I mean, you're looking at our class size numbers are very desirable, right? Of what we currently have, right? If I took that to almost any other district, any other state, they would be, salivating over these class sizes. But it doesn't mean that, even though that looks well within the range of this policy, it doesn't mean that there aren't needs in certain ones of those classes. And when we need additional support, the principals are great about advocating, and then we have. Right now I'm grappling with, one of the classes that we had last year that there were concerns about that had a 23 in it. Now I have a request from a parent that they're wanting to transfer into that school, right? And am I going to just follow the hard number of a policy, or am I going to reach out to the principal to say, what are you wanting to do and what do you think? And probably follow the recommendation of that. I just don't want us thinking that there are magic numbers when it comes to class size.
Sarah.
I really appreciated Will's comment about hiring new staff and having them be able to be up and running in our school district. What I am confused about is that we've got, he sees that there could potentially be a concern, but then we also have the principal's input as to what the numbers should be in our policy. What is the magic number? What would trigger another hire? What would trigger another class? Is there really another number that would really trigger that? You know what I'm saying?
Right, so is there a target? We like to keep it in the 20 to 22, but if we hit a hard 25, then we have to do
Is that really the number where because I don't feel like we really have that number. We have guidelines for where we'd like to be, but the reality is that, at 22, we really can't be hiring another person, another staff member. We can't have another class. Is it 23? Is it 24? Is it 25? What is the real number?
I don't think there is a real number. I think that Will just had, in the last year, I think he had a 24, right? And, we trusted the judgment of Will to say, this is what I think is best for that set of kids. If you're asking me what is the real number in this district, I think for K through 8 in reading, writing, math, I would say that the real number is 25, right? I just think that there would be this huge up, if you're asking my opinion, at what point, what is the number that just would not be probably tolerated? I would say 25, and I would say things below that we're relying heavily on our principals to reach out to me when they think that there is a need.
Naomi.
I know when we discussed the numbers, one of the things we were really mindful of is that we have such different schools that if we set the number too low, we put maybe Lisa in a position to have to come every single class, every single time to you to request or just to discuss, and then it comes to the board every single time because we set it where it's not necessarily something that's going to work for a small school like that. So that was just one thing we kept in mind, and I think that's why we did the ratio too, so that there was that flexibility there.
So this is based on a ratio, so kids to adults. or
So
teachers.
I'd like to,
Kids to
I'd like to,
Do it different ways.
Right.
now there are ways to have a policy that is very flexible so that the discussion happens, but it happens earlier on. So if you have a conversation earlier on about a class size by saying, okay, when you hit this target, then we converse, doesn't mean that you have to hire necessarily, doesn't mean that you have to hire a teacher necessarily. I mean, there could be a host of, a menu of options that if you hit whatever number is a target, then you either hire a teacher or an ed tech, or you don't act on it. You just think it's fine and you let it rest. So I don't think that lowering the number in the chart necessarily pushes anyone in a situation where there is less flexibility. The flexibility can be maintained, but I agree with Maddie that within that flexibility, the board needs to be involved early on in the discussion. And if there are more discussions, because there are more classes that fall into the range where the discussion needs to happen, I don't have a problem with it. I mean, we could have it designated times during the year, like the beginning of the year or the end of the year, and we just look at all those cases at once. And in the meantime, there is flexibility for the principal to begin that conversation and not necessarily make a decision.
I guess my thought on Jeremy's question about, we have a number and then we sort of have the grace 1 or 2 before the conversation has to happen. I sort of looked at that more as a nod to what we've heard from board members and from community members that we want to keep numbers low. But I mean, there's not a point in any class where we're not having a conversation before any of our other schools that we compare ourselves to in every other way, right? I mean, 24 and 25 is, every school from 6 through 8, right? So we have to have the conversation at 24. For them, that's still within policy, and they could add another before they even have to have the conversation. So I like that it's when I first saw 22, I actually was like, oh, I think this is going to create an issue if, we have to do something at 22. I think this is written, I like the way that, I think this is well crafted in a way that we keep the numbers lower, right, than when we'd have to pull a trigger and have to make a move. But it requires the conversation still earlier than other people would be having the conversation. So I like that. I think it does speak to what we value in our community as small class sizes, which, as Dr. Foley said, our 20 to 22 is actually pretty enviable when I talk to, elementary school teachers around the country. So,
Mike, sure, go ahead.
I'm just going to if I just throw a couple of more pieces in there. Sarah, I would suggest that, I don't know the exact number, but when we look at the numbers we have, I don't think any of us get to 25. I mean, and you see that in our history. So I would suggest that in the same way we sort of look at what are our current and past practices, we don't get to 25. So if you ask me a hard number, we generally would 24 is about it. And just to give you a sense of some other flexibility that rolls with these things, last year, that class that has 24, 23, just so happened that there was a one-year teacher, someone was on a leave of absence, and then there was a maternity leave, and that group then were faced with some less experienced teachers. And so we had gone relatively early in the year when we saw how that was unfolding to Dr. Foley, we had shifted some ed tech support around to give them that support during that year, last year. This year, when they are now with their far more established middle school team in 7th grade, they no longer need that level of support. But it happened pretty quickly, and that was just circumstantial. The piece I want to just push out there, again, with all due respect, is that I think we have to be very cautious about coming to the board to discuss in detail every time there's a concern about class size, for a number of reasons, one of which would be confidentiality. I think it would be a very risky precedent if there was perhaps some behaviors occur in a class and that the school was working to address those, that we then bring it out on television and in the public domain saying in Mrs. Jones' class, there's one student too many, and yet the behaviors are out of control because of these two boys. Now, although they wouldn't say, no, I understand people wouldn't say those two boys, but I guarantee you were saying parents want to know. Parents would know. Parents know very clearly from their children who is sort of disruptive or who's loud. And so although we would be politically polite and correct around not naming names, I think the inference of it to those who are closely associated with that issue would be clear. And I think we have to be very cautious about that we would unintentionally sort of really focus in on a situation in a class that really should be dealt with at the school level, at the principal level, with the support of the superintendent, and that if it then goes beyond that, obviously that's where it may become a board issue. But if we have some transiency, and there's increased transiency in Freeport, much more so than in Durham and Pownell, where numbers are coming and then going, I'm just not quite sure what that would look like. So I just would ask that before that kind of piece becomes associated, that we would have a chance to think about that and really think about what the implications are and what that would actually look like in reality. So you're actually getting the information you want or the voice that you want, but that we're doing it in a way that isn't a sort of meeting by meeting process depending on where we bump up against numbers. That's all. Thank you.
In no way do I want to suggest that the board would be doing the work of the administrators and going into that level of detail. In no way. I think I would just want to hear, like you were offering an example earlier, and I think it's possible to do it very obliquely. There's an issue, without saying what the issue is. You don't have to say it's behavior, but there's a specific issue in this class and we're addressing it in this way. And that way, if indeed there are parents in the community who are hearing from their children that there's a problem in a classroom and they're concerned about what decisions are being made, they have the opportunity to come and address us publicly.
With all due respect, I think the step for them, for parents in that situation, it really is to come to the school. I mean, we encourage parents to go to the closest source to the problem. So we start with the teacher. If that doesn't work, we come to the principal. If that doesn't work, they go to the superintendent. And I really think that method and that practice, which is well established in school systems across the state, is the way it should happen. Because otherwise, what we're trying to do is problem solve at the closest to the problem, right? And so I assure you that we communicate, and parents communicate with us. Again, they're well aware, and that really is that piece. And I think Dr. Foley would concur that she will have parents come and say, I'm worried about what's going on in my child's class. And I really think that's the forum for it. And certainly if a person felt they were getting no response or an inappropriate response or no satisfaction, that's the way it then escalates up that ladder. But I do think it needs to start with the structures that we have in play, and I just wouldn't want to inadvertently create a system that sort of bypasses that process. That's all. No, I'm sure not. I just would.
I've been listening to all your ideas, and I think everybody has really good points. And I just want to throw out a possibility for a revision that it may or may not be a good idea, but that's how I roll. I just come up with ideas. So, I think one idea that just came to mind is, so we have this word target, and to me that means this is what we want. And for me, some of these numbers are too high for what is like the ideal class size. Like, to me, a target is what we're shooting for. It's a goal. But I also really appreciate this idea of, what is the tipping point? Where does it merit a board level discussion? Because we do not want to be micromanaging. We don't want, all your points are totally, I hear you loud and clear. So maybe we have an additional column in this thing. So we have grade level span, we have target student teacher ratio, and I would revise some of those numbers in there. And then we have a maximum column, which is the tipping point at which the superintendent would make a recommendation to the board based on the situation, and the board would agree or disagree with the recommendation. At that level that we're talking about, at some point, there is a point where the community wouldn't support it. And I think that being clear about what our target is and what that tipping point is would be more effective in the policy. So we're not getting in the weeds with micromanaging, but we're saying I do think the board should have a weigh in. If we're at 25, we don't know what superintendent is going to be here. We don't know what administrators are going to be here. This is a policy that should feel good for a lot of different people who are future people, and I would like to set up to be comfortable for in support of what the community would want for that. And so I don't know, what do you guys think about that?
I don't see that what you're suggesting is much different than the clearly exceeds by 2. So I want to know what you think would happen differently if the max was hit than if we exceeded by 2, how it's currently written. That's what I want to know more, understand
I guess,
better.
I'm just sensitive to not micromanaging. So maybe it has less to do with that. What I wrote here, I don't know if it's different or not, but I wrote, so if you had some sort of max column, but which may or may not be the same thing as exceeds by 2, but when an elementary or middle school class size hits the maximum, say it's 24 students in 6 through 8 or something, then the superintendent, in consultation with the principal, shall consider options and make a recommendation to the board. And then the board would weigh in at that level. But
I guess I worry about our role is not to weigh in on that. It is their role to run the schools and make the decisions. We set the policy, and then they execute the policy. We don't get to weigh in again as they execute the policy, in my understanding of our job.
Yeah, but if we are going to write a policy that gives a lot of flexibility to the administrators, then that requires that there is some accountability and that the board has some way to be part of that process. So yes, you can write a policy that says...
But we don't have to vote on it and say approve or decline.
No, but if you write a policy that says, okay, this is the policy and it's cut and dry, black and white, and then you can work within the terms of the policy, then yeah, the board doesn't have to be involved in the process after that. But if we write a policy that gives a lot of flexibility, then I think it's very appropriate for the board to stay involved in exchange for all that flexibility, so that the board still has an ability to weigh in the conversation.
I think weighing in and voting is different, right? We should not be the judge in that scenario. That's micromanaging.
No, but we should be part of the conversation.
That I agree with.
Okay.
I'm curious. These are a set of guidelines. This is a target, but I don't know what these are. I don't know how these are written. I don't know if these numbers are hard. At 20, we don't take any more people into a class, or if it's just a guideline. Do we have any more information about that?
At one point, I think we had all the policies behind it. We did not bring that tonight, but it would be easy to I think most of them were very flexible and written as guidelines. because every school district is grappling with the same thing that we do in these situations, right? So when you start writing a class size policy with strict rules to adhere to, it can become very challenging. So when you think about Pownell, there are space issues, right? So if you write a really hard policy that, you know, thou shalt not have more than this, we may have to start bringing in portables when it's really not needed, for example. So every school district is kind of grappling with that, and that's why I think class size policies are written much more as a set of guidelines, because everybody recognizes that it's more the cohort than the magic number. Although there are definitely, I would agree, I think 25 is the number that this community cannot tolerate.
So I just pulled up Yarmouth's. They have a target, they have a min, and they have a max. I don't know if it even says that. I was going to say, yeah.
Candy has it.
Oh, you got
I
it.
have the old things, and we've got Falmouth, Brunswick, Yarmouth, Topsom, and Cape Elizabeth. I guess we had them all.
They're probably all different, right?
They are all a little bit different. A lot of them talk about striving to meet their class sizes, and talk about, here in Topsom, principals are to provide the superintendent of schools and board of directors with a written notification and recommendations in instances when class sizes, class loads, and course enrollments exceed ranges. There's several of them talk about them being guidelines. In Brunswick, it's guidelines, pure and simple. Yarmouth, the goal of the Yarmouth School Committee is to, it's so small, is to provide class sizes that are well within the suggested maximum limits set by the state of Maine.
What Yarmouth says is when a high school class flows below 10 or over 25-1 in any elementary or middle school class, they fail to meet the ratios. The principal shall notify this. It's almost word for word what we have in here. I'm guessing that was the base.
Yes.
Yeah. And it basically says that they'll meet with the superintendent, they'll consider these options, adding a teacher, reassigning kids, and then the superintendent's decision will be communicated to the school committee each October with the understanding that the approval will be required for additional staff.
Yes, we did have all of that in front of us when we were working on the policy.
Yeah.
Can one of the administrators or Becky share a situation? I'm trying to imagine, like,
did you notice they bailed on you fast when we got to this?
It's Valentine's Day.
Sorry.
Is there?
Will's wife doesn't care.
Did you get a card?
Is there a situation that you could paint for me where a class size is 26 and you're making a recommendation to stay as is? No, you're not making a recommendation. You're making the decision. You're reporting to the board that your decision is that 26 is the best thing for the district.
Well, and I'm assuming,
situation is that?
right, and so I'm assuming you're not talking about music or something.
Well, that's already excluded.
Right.
Okay. Okay.
So I'm trying to imagine that scenario, and I can't.
I'm really struggling to paint that picture. Because yeah.
But it's not really related to Becky's opinion on when she would make that call. I mean, the policy is supposed to last through multiple superintendents, administrators, everyone. And in this policy, you could have a superintendent who decides that class size is not a priority, and they could let the class for 5th grade go to 22, and then nothing gets done, and then it goes to 2 or more above the ratio, which is 24, and then they have a conversation with the principal alone, and then the options that they can use, the first one is no action required. So they may get to 24 and decide that no action is taken, and then they inform the board, and the board doesn't have.
Well, the board has
That's
the
right.
authority over the superintendent.
I was going to say, let's go back to the
Right.
evaluation
And the
that
wa-
we just approved.
Right.
Well, yeah, but you have to wait for the evaluation. The way the policy describes it, yeah, the way this policy is written, it says the board approval will be required to hire any additional staff, but it doesn't say that the board approval is required for anything else.
And I agree that it shouldn't be. I mean, I would like to see a policy where it is. I mean, I don't know if Candy has them all or we could see them next time, but I'd be interested to see if there are any policies and the folks that have class size policies that say that the board weighs in as the final say.
The one she just read in Topsom, it said will consult with the principal and the board. The board was included there.
On that, let me just play that one out. So right now it says that if we exceed by 2 or more, that the principal's to notify me, and then we will consider options. And then it says the superintendent's decision. Once we hit 2 or more, which is well below 26, the superintendent's decision will be communicated to the RSU Board of Directors. And definitely what it's saying in there is if I'm recommending we need another teacher, that I can never do that without board approval. But once I'm communicating, like, I really think we're fine on 26, there's nothing that prevents the board from saying, well, we're not fine on 26, and we're voting to have you hire another teacher. So
That's not written in this policy.
Yeah, it's inferred. It's inferred. Well, it's inferred. I mean,
I don't think so.
Yeah, no. I mean, you can always
But how is that
direct.
different than micromanaging? I mean, that's the same thing. As do it at 23, do it 26, do it at 28. Like, it's still the same action by the board, which is perceived as micromanaging on one hand, and then on the other hand, appropriate given some unwritten circumstance.
Well, I mean, definitely you're sending the message of we're on that, let's go with that one, with the 26, that, at this time, we don't agree with the superintendent on that decision. We think that's a poor decision. The reason it's written like that is by statute, I cannot hire additional staff without, your vote. That's why.
I want to add language in here that allows the board to basically ensure that class sizes don't get out of control. I mean, and whether we as a board say, that's 24, 25, 26, 28, 30, like, there is a point where I feel like the board should be able to be like, it's not an option to do nothing. This is not okay. And I mean, I don't think that would realistically happen during, given the tenor of, our administrators and superintendent now. But I don't want to have my hands tied behind my back with a superintendent at some point that is condoning.
We control the superintendent, though. Right? In terms of our job is to manage the superintendent. So if we are unhappy with the decisions and the choices they're making and the direction they're putting our district, then we replace the superintendent.
Yes.
No, it's not.
You hire someone who's going to fix it.
Right.
Absolutely.
But why not just put a limit in here?
Instead of just firing the superintendent.
I mean,
just so you know, we're going to fire you if you do this. Valley.
So I would like to make a motion that we approve policy IBB, class size, first read with the following amendments. First paragraph remains the same. Second paragraph remains the same. The chart, pre-K 16 to 1 with the asterisk, remains the same. K to 2, student to teacher ratio 18 to 1. 3 to 5, 20 to 1. 6 to 8, 21 to 1. Following paragraph stays the same. Following paragraph stays the same. Next paragraph. When any elementary or middle school class size clearly exceeds by 2 or more students, I would amend that to read, when any elementary or middle school class size, strike clearly, exceeds, strike by 2 or more students, add the above ratios, or any high school course falls below 5-to-1 ratio, the principal shall notify the superintendent. The superintendent, in consultation with the principal, add, and the board shall consider options to resolve the issue. Options may include, but are not limited to: first bullet, assigning additional staff. Second bullet, transferring some students to a different class. Third bullet, canceling the course, or add. And last bullet, add, taking no action. Strike the first bullet, no action required. Strike the last paragraph.
No, I think Michelle made the same point I was trying to make, is that like number 2 standard on our eval for our superintendent is policy and governance, and their execution of that, the policies we set. And so every year we will be doing the evaluation, and if we're not happy with, and it doesn't even have to be during the evaluation. This discussion comes up during budget. We have the power to add a teacher at any point in time to the budget. That's the board's, that's one of our
prerogatives.
Prerogatives, thank you. I think what I'm hearing is people want to hear, like, throughout the year, every time this happens, as students flow in and out of the district, and I just feel like it really ties the hands of our administrators to respond quickly and efficiently to the needs of the students. And so those were the points I wanted to make. And we have a motion on the floor, so I don't think I can, I'll just stop.
You could amend the motion if you wanted to.
So, wait, she wasn't supposed to do that?
What?
You can't discuss?
No, she can discuss.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, all right.
Yep. I think she wanted to do something else.
Oh.
Yeah, I think this is way too constricting. So now any consultation between the principal and the superintendent now needs to include the board in consideration of the options. I think that's overreaching. A 19 kids in a second grade class now becomes a board discussion every time it happens. I'm not comfortable with that. I think it's way too constricting from a I thought this was the way it was originally written. I felt was a good compromise between what we were hearing from the sort of the variety of folks on this issue, and I think this just oversteps the amendment to the policy as presented. So
I would have to agree.
Jen.
I agree with that too.
I guess I just want to point out with that, like K-2 at 18, when you look at that chart, you're going to need another teacher at Moore Street. You're going to need another teacher at Pownell in kindergarten. You're going to need another teacher at Durham. You're going to need another teacher at Pownell in second grade.
So
And
may I clarify?
Or you're going to have to come to eat, or we're going to have to discuss, I don't know, was that 4? We're going to have to come and have a board discussion about all 4 of those classes. That feels like micromanagement to me. And based upon what we know, administrators know about student achievement, you don't have an administrator in RSU 5 that's going to do anything that's going to impact the culture or lessen the student achievement. It just seems very, very restrictive.
Maddie.
I think the spirit of the amended policy is the same. It's a general guide, and I don't think it necessarily needs to be a board discussion. I think it can be handled effectively, and I think there still can be a lot of trust in the process.
But the way it was amended, it said in consultation with the principal and the board shall consider the following options, is what I heard. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So so anything above this brings it to the board.
A consultation can be a brief or a lengthy consultation.
How many consultations do you recall of ours being brief?
We had one tonight.
To be taken, right?
I think it's possible, and I think to suggest that the spirit of the amendment is mistrusting is.
Oh, I don't think it's mistrusting so much as I think it's micromanaging.
No, may I clarify? Maybe there's a better word, but I think the way I read consultation is the way Matt is interpreting it.
So what would you envision?
That Becky comes to us and says, these are the classes where we're exceeding the target, and these are the suggestions that we have. Are you okay with it? And that suggestion doesn't mean that a teacher needs to be added in all those classes. That suggestion means that you may say, hey, I talked to Will, and Will says this class is okay, we're over the target, but he's totally comfortable. Are you guys okay? I don't doubt that this board will say that's okay. If another situation arises where the class is at 24 for a fourth grade class, that may be a different situation where the board feels that, well, you know, we may want to consider, because there are 5 different groups in that grade, adding another teacher, because if we add another teacher, the classes will be 19, say, instead of 24. So the consultation here, I don't think it means direction of the board. I think it means the board is informed of what the administrative team believes is the best way forward, and the board is in the process of approving the decision that is being presented as the most effective to address each situation.
Naomi.
So, but we're not always going to be the board, just like they're not all, for the same reasons. So the next board might want to approve every single one, and then what are you doing? So you can't say that this board would say it's okay and go along with the recommendation. We might, but we don't know what the future looks like on this end either.
And for me, any consultation, like if we want to go to that the board gets a vote, then I want those numbers higher before it comes to us. I want the threshold higher and more impactful before we weigh in. If we want, the numbers to be guidelines and let them make the call, the right call based on their expertise in their field, which is why we hired them, then I'm okay having the numbers be a little more fluid from that perspective. But if we're going to weigh in, then I want those numbers higher, not lower than what's on this chart. Sarah.
I would agree with you. I think the spirit of this says that we would be consulted, but we would not be making those decisions. That's the job of the administrators and the principals. I like the idea of being consulted, but not weighing in. That is micromanagement. I also think that these numbers, if we lower them, it's only in the spirit of what you were saying, that, Lindsay, that this is a guideline. These are targets. We'd like to be lower if possible, but that doesn't necessarily mean we have to hit them or it triggers something. If we do that, though, if we lower them, I think we do need to have 2 or more students. And we do have to, it can't be as soon as that happens, then all of a sudden, because we're going to be having this conversation at every meeting.
A lot.
Yeah.
Jen.
I'm extremely concerned about the language of consult versus inform versus, consult equals discussion. I mean, a consultation is a discussion. And I just, the thought of having this discussion every time and thinking that the board is going to at some point ever agree. I mean, it's a complete, it is absolutely never going to happen because we all have different like philosophical ideas about how schools should be run. But the bottom line is we have hired Becky to be our superintendent. She's in charge of all of the principals, and I just feel like our personal philosophies on how we think schools should be run does not belong here, is my opinion.
Candy.
A couple things. Number one, I would not opt for lowering any of the numbers. As Becky said, these numbers are enviable to begin with, and if you look at the cohorts, we're below, we're doing very well in terms of our cohort group, in terms of desirability for that kind of thing. And I guess the other thing, I certainly hear the concern about wanting to know a little bit sooner about some of these things. And again, we've hired Becky and our principals, and I think we need to trust them. The only time I think that it might need to come to us sooner is if there was some really situation that was very extremely impactful or that kind of thing. Your average decision about these kinds of things, I think we need to respect the principal and the superintendent and trust them.
I think Jen's point is really well made, and I certainly don't envision rehashing philosophy in every single discussion. I mean, I truly would not want to create any policy that would erode trust among the board or between the board and the administrators. I truly see this as I only picture this as a brief consultation, and I have seen this board in my brief time on the board time and time again trust the administrators and trust the principals and take, have a couple questions, but take what they recommend to heart, and I would foresee that happening. I don't think the amendments erode that at all.
I think what Will said about the confidentiality issues is that really rang, is very important to me. I wonder if we should.
Security guy.
Says the security guy, yes. Gleba rules, right? So, I do wonder if we want to, because this is a guideline, no doubt. Whatever we end up with in this chart for final numbers is a guideline. I wonder if we want to insert some language around projected numbers. Is this really a discussion for this time of year? I don't want to get into October when, Billy Bad Boy is destroying the class. You know that kid, and he's when he's destroying that class. That is absolutely no doubt not for our purview. That's for the administrators. But maybe if we put it as it is a guide, and I really like how he said general guide. I thought that's better than guideline. In this case, I don't know if that came up, guidelines versus general guide. But if we threw in some language about this being projected, this is when we should be making these decisions and helping to, lead the philosophical. Yes, we want to shoot for 20 or 22, whatever we end up at, but make it more of a projected, which is really what a guideline is, or general guide in this case. So I would like to see these target numbers a little lower. Towards the bottom of this chart, but keep the 2 or more students so we're not hamstringing the administration and let them do their jobs at the same time. So projected is the word I keep having in my head.
I think it's funny. We keep saying we trust the administrators, that what they'll bring to us is what, we trust them. They brought us these numbers. Mm-hmm. They're the ones who came up with them. So.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor in a second. For an amended class size policy. I'm gonna.
Please do.
I wasn't going to read it. I was
Oh.
going to say you should get with Valley after. I think she's got it written down.
I can watch the tape too.
Yeah.
But if you want her to repeat it?
Do people feel like they need to hear it again?
Yep.
Okay.
And I would like to amend my own amendment, having heard some of the discussion, and that would be to not add in consultation with the principal and the board. Just leave it in consultation with the principal and leave the last sentence as is, but everything else will remain the same. So should I read the amendment
okay with the second?
with the amendment?
As long as he seconds,
Okay.
affirms his second. Okay.
So the table would stay the same. First, second paragraph's the same. Table pre-K 16 to 1, K through 2 18 to 1, 3 to 5 20 to 1, 6 to 8 21 to 1. Third, fourth paragraph the same. Fifth paragraph would still strike out clearly, still strike out by 2 or more students, and add the above ratios. And the bullets would still read: first bullet, assigning additional staff; second, transferring some students to a different class; third, canceling the course; and add the fourth bullet, taking no action. And then the last sentence will remain as is, so that the superintendent's decision will be communicated to the RSU board, and the board approval will be required to hire additional staff. And that eliminates the concern about micromanagement.
Okay.
Can you repeat the bullets, please?
I think it's the same bullets. She just took the first one and made it the fourth one.
Okay, thanks.
Is
I was
that
confused
fair?
by
Is that what you did?
Yeah, and I spelled it taking no action, just to be
Okay.
comparable to the other bullets.
Yeah.
Says the writer people. Okay. You're comfortable with your second, John, on that? I appreciate the striking of the adding the board and leaving the last sentence. I still can't support the without the exceeding the 2 and lowering the numbers, but.
So can I just paraphrase for clarity something?
Sure.
So does that effectively say then, I guess I'm just a little bit unclear about that paragraph, when any elementary or middle school class size. So you want to report out to the board when a fourth grade class is at 20, let's see, you struck out the 2 or more, exceeds by 2 or more.
So
when-
21.
So 21, you want a board report?
When it gets to, say, a fourth grade class, I have 3 to 5, 20 to 1. So when you get above 20 for a fourth grade class, then the principal and the superintendent will converse, and their decision will be communicated to us.
Okay. Right, so you have board report. Okay, we ready to vote on that? All those in favor of the policy as amended? Sarah?
Sarah go?
She had to go. She wasn't feeling well. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Okay, so let's.
You want a sneak peek? I can tell you what happens. Opposed? So that amendment passes. So that is just the first read. It's 5 to 5, but they're weighted voting. So I don't know what it means when we amend. Now it comes back for a second read.
Yeah.
As amended, and we vote again.
Yeah.
And it can be amended again, the second read?
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. So, okay. So is there any other information anybody would like when they come back with the second read?
Do you have to go back to the first? Do you have to go back to the first motion?
We didn't have a
original?
motion. We didn't have
Okay,
a motion,
all right.
so she put the motion on the floor and amended it.
Okay.
So I would like, if, with these new ratios, to know what the financial impact would be in hiring, or if, we need to look at it and see what that kind of because there's no wiggle room here as far as.
It doesn't say we have to hire anybody.
No, but.
One of the bullets is no action required. So
understand
every principal will decide what the right path forward is.
Okay, but that opens up a lot more blue on this paper.
Yeah, I would like to see the page updated with blue.
And so
right, to see what's outside.
we need to
range.
know what we're looking at,
Yeah.
because even though we say that, no action required,
We shouldn't, right.
I just want to know what it looks like.
Right. We don't necessarily want to set a policy in place that we're constantly blowing all over the place.
Exactly.
Even if we decide that we're okay with it.
What's
Are
the
we
point
really
of a
okay?
policy if no action required is every single time until we hit 24? You know what I'm saying? It's.
Yeah. All right, we'll talk about it next time.
Would you also like other impacts for other staffing?
Say again?
So if the blue, with the blue, do you want any information on, when given to the principals with their current numbers, how that might impact them if they had to add that additional? Would they have to hire a .5
specialists
phys ed? Would they have to do? I'm asking if that's data that you want.
I think that's nice to have information. I'm not sure.
I know
if that's
Emily's
a
already
reasonable
kind of
request.
worked it down.
Oh, she does. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, if it's easily attainable, great. I don't want. I know everybody's got a lot going on right now.
Although, Cynthia, I wouldn't want that study to assume that every time you have a blue square, you're adding a teacher.
Correct.
Because that's very, very unlikely to be the case. So if you want to do that, then that's totally fine. But if you bring that to me, I will say, likely not to happen, likely not to happen, likely
So
not to
why
happen.
are we setting the target there if we're not going to do anything?
Because they may decide, well, I want 0.1 more time EdTech for this class.
And there's nothing that
And
says they
they
can't do
want
that anyway. All right. So we are now past 10, which means we need to vote. Kate, yes.
I was just hoping that for the second policy read, if we could have some additional information that Emily had brought to the policy committee that set the original student-teacher ratios as recommended by the administrators that we are deciding to reject at this point in time. And there was another piece of information I wanted to know, but I forgot it already. I'll email if I
I was going to say,
remember.
when you email the board.
I could make a recommendation that we postpone the next executive session till the next meeting.
Yes. Okay, what was it?
I would also like to know how many of these decisions are made during the summer, historically.
Oh, when we don't meet? Yep. Okay. Okay, so are folks in favor, the executive session, tabling that? I think we knew today it was going to be a long one, and it's not time sensitive. It's not. Yes.
We meet in 2 weeks.
Yes. Yeah. Next week's the vacation week, and then we meet the following.
Does that double
28th.
our executive session next week, next time?
This one shouldn't be too long.
Okay. Okay.
So will we have a board meeting before negotiations?
We weren't going to talk about negotiations tonight anyway.
Oh, okay.
That's not what this was about. This was
Administrator.
Yeah, this was administrator negotiations, not teacher contract negotiations. Sorry, Will.
Did we have a motion? I missed it. I didn't hear.
No.
The motion.
So do we?
Recommendation.
So do we need a motion to table?
Everybody's packing up, so I just want to make sure we have a motion.
I think we can.
We just motion to adjourn. Okay, so we tabled that, and we need a motion to adjourn.
Okay.
Naomi, Jen, all those in favor? Goodbye. Thank you.
Kate, I'm